The Urartu Kingdom, seated among the high volcanic ridges of what is now eastern Turkey and Armenia, rose like a stone crown above the waters of Lake Van. Between the 9th and 6th centuries BCE, kings and their subjects carved fortresses into mountainsides, dug canals to carry water to fields, and forged bronze into helmets, shields, and ceremonial vessels. The marks they left on the landscape speak softly across centuries, hinting at the rhythm of a life once lived in quiet order, shaped by necessity and devotion. Urartu was more than a kingdom. It was a network of fortified cities and settlements, each connected by roads, rivers, and valleys, forming a culture that combined practical survival with artistic expression. Archaeological evidence suggests that Urartu emerged from the highlands as a response to opportunity and challenge. The rugged terrain offered natural protection, fertile valleys encouraged agriculture, and the nearby lake provided fresh water and fish. Early settlements were clusters of stone and wood, evolving gradually into towns and fortresses as populations grew and kings asserted authority. Inscriptions carved into cliff faces, often using Assyrian cuneiform adapted for the Urartian language, list kings such as Sarduri, Menua, and Argisti. They record tribute, resources, construction projects, and religious observances, hinting at a complex administrative system and a people deeply aware of order and hierarchy. Life in Urartu can be imagined in gentle detail. Families lived in stone houses with timber and reed roofs, arranged around small courtyards where the smoke from cooking fires drifted into the crisp mountain air. Clothing was practical, but occasionally adorned with decorative motifs, made from wool or linen and fastened with bronze pins or beads. Their diet came from cultivated fields and herds, supplemented by fishing in the lake and hunting in the mountains. Bread, barley porridge, lentils, dried fruits, and seasonal vegetables were common, while wine and beer were enjoyed during festivals or ceremonial occasions. Temples and shrines, carved from rock or built from carefully fitted stones, punctuated settlements. Priests and kings oversaw rituals, offering bronze vessels and animal sacrifices, invoking gods who governed water, fertility, and war. The Urartians were skilled artisans and craftsmen. Bronze workers forged helmets, axes, shields, and intricate vessels, often engraved with animal motifs or symbols of deities. Potters shaped clay into a variety of forms, from large storage jars to delicate cups, painted with geometric patterns or simple incised designs. Stoneworkers carved defensive walls, gates, and towers, creating a network of fortifications that could withstand sieges. Each creation was both functional and symbolic, reflecting a civilization that balanced necessity with artistry. Water management was central to their society. Canals and aqueducts channeled lake and river water into terraces and fields, ensuring consistent harvests even in harsh seasons. The Menua Canal, stretching for many kilometers, remains partially functional today, a silent testament to their engineering skill. Roads linked fortresses and towns, facilitating trade, troop movements, and communication, weaving together an empire that was both remote and interconnected. Trade and economy were woven into the quiet life of Urartu. Metals, copper, iron, and tin were extracted from mountain deposits and exchanged for grain, textiles, and crafted goods from neighboring regions. Livestock, such as sheep and cattle, moved seasonally between high pastures and lower valleys. Markets were modest, but they allowed the circulation of goods, ideas, and techniques, sustaining a culture that was both practical and culturally rich. In the quiet of their settlements, the rhythm of daily life was punctuated by ritual and ceremony. Temples dedicated to gods like Haldi, Tesheba, and Shivini stood at strategic locations, commanding views of valleys, rivers, and mountains. Offerings were made, inscriptions carved, and ceremonies performed with care, demonstrating an intimate connection between the people and their landscape. Even as kings expanded fortresses and organized military campaigns, the spiritual life of Urartu remained a central focus, woven into agriculture, defense, and governance. The Urartians were skilled artisans and craftsmen. Bronze workers forged helmets, axes, shields, and intricate vessels, often engraved with animal motifs or symbols of deities. Potters shaped clay into a variety of forms, from large storage jars to delicate cups, painted with geometric patterns or simple incised designs. Stoneworkers carved defensive walls, gates, and towers, creating a network of fortifications that could withstand sieges. Each creation was both functional and symbolic, reflecting a civilization that balanced necessity with artistry. Water management was central to their society. Canals and aqueducts channeled lake and river water into terraces and fields, ensuring consistent harvests even in harsh seasons. The Minoa Canal, stretching for many kilometers, remains partially functional today, a silent testament to their engineering skill. Roads linked fortresses and towns, facilitating trade, troop movements, and communication, weaving together an empire that was both remote and interconnected. Trade and economy were woven into the quiet life of Urartu. Metals, copper, iron, and tin were extracted from mountain deposits and exchanged for grain, textiles, and crafted goods from neighboring regions. Livestock, such as sheep and cattle, moved seasonally between high pastures and lower valleys. Markets were modest, but they allowed the circulation of goods, ideas, and techniques, sustaining a culture that was both practical and culturally rich. In the quiet of their settlements, the rhythm of daily life was punctuated by ritual and ceremony. Temples dedicated to gods like Haldi, Tesheba, and Shivini stood at strategic locations, commanding views of valleys, rivers, and mountains. Offerings were made, inscriptions carved, and ceremonies performed with care, demonstrating an intimate connection between the people and their landscape. Even as kings expanded fortresses and organized military campaigns, the spiritual life of Urartu remained a central focus, woven into agriculture, defense, and governance. The military of Urartu, while formidable, was closely tied to their geography. Fortresses were perched atop ridges, walls built with massive stone blocks carefully fitted without mortar, a testament to engineering and foresight. Bronze helmets, shields, and weapons were standard among the warrior elite, while chariots and cavalry operated along valleys and passes, ensuring the kingdom could respond swiftly to threats. Inscriptions detail campaigns, sieges, and alliances, showing a people deeply aware of the precarious balance between power and survival. Yet, despite their careful planning and robust defenses, many aspects of Urartu remain a mystery. Archaeologists continue to debate the exact nature of their political system, the full extent of their trade networks, and the reasons for their eventual decline. Some fortresses were abandoned suddenly. Others show evidence of destruction, but no single explanation accounts for the kingdom's end. The language, partially deciphered through inscriptions, leaves gaps in understanding, and many artifacts remain unstudied or lost to time. Even the rituals, the daily customs, and the full scope of their artistry can only be glimpsed through surviving remains, inviting contemplation and quiet wonder. Walking through the ruins today, one senses both absence and presence. The walls, though broken, still carry the weight of human endeavor. The canals still trace paths cut by careful hands. The hills and valleys echo faintly with the passage of centuries. It is in this quiet reflection, in the contemplation of stone, water, and sky, that the story of Urartu becomes a gentle guide, inviting us to drift through history without urgency, to imagine a world of resilience, craft, and calm order. As the highlands grow still under the waning light, the fortresses of Urartu settle into shadow. The bronze and stone of the past whisper across time, leaving impressions of a kingdom that shaped its environment, mastered its resources, and expressed human creativity through the rhythm of daily life. In the silence, questions remain. The full scope of their trade, the details of their political hierarchies, the reasons behind the abandonment of certain strongholds. Each unanswered question floats like a soft current, carrying the mind gently forward, inviting curiosity without pressure, and guiding the listener into a reflective reverie. The legacy of Urartu lingers in subtle ways. Modern archaeology continues to uncover fragments, from inscriptions and fortresses to irrigation channels still traceable today. Scholars debate and interpret, slowly piecing together the narrative of a civilization whose influence extended far beyond its highland home. And yet, for those who approach these ruins with patience, there is more than history. There is a sense of continuity, a thread connecting human effort, ingenuity, and quiet reflection across millennia. As the last stone walls fade into the soft embrace of dusk, the story of Urartu, like all lost civilizations, remains suspended between the known and the unknown. Its rivers, mountains, and fortresses are memories etched into the earth, patiently waiting for the attentive eye to notice, for the quiet mind to... The Mitanni Kingdom, flourishing between approximately 1500 and 1300 BCE in the region of northern Mesopotamia, was a Hurrian-speaking state known for its skilled chariot warriors and complex political networks. Situated in a fertile crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the kingdom leveraged its geographic position to control trade routes linking Egypt, the Hittites, and the Assyrians. Its influence extended across northern Syria and southeastern Anatolia, where cities rose along rivers and plains, demonstrating a careful balance of agriculture, defense, and urban planning. The Mitanni were not merely warriors, they were diplomats, horse trainers, and administrators, leaving traces of their culture through treaties, inscriptions, and the elite nomenclature preserved in royal archives. Archaeological evidence suggests that Mitanni developed from Hurrian tribal communities into a centralized kingdom under a line of kings whose names often reflected Indo-Aryan influence, such as Tushratta and Artatama. These kings managed the kingdom with a blend of military skill and diplomatic strategy, negotiating treaties with neighboring empires. One such treaty with the Egyptian pharaoh Amenhotep III outlines marital alliances, trade agreements, and mutual defense obligations. Such documents reveal a kingdom aware of the delicate balance of power in a region where city-states and empires constantly vied for dominance. The cities of Mitanni were modest in scale compared to contemporaneous Egyptian or Mesopotamian metropolises, yet they were carefully planned with citadels, administrative centers, and residential areas. Fortifications were constructed with mud brick and stone, often with watchtowers overlooking surrounding plains. Houses were generally rectangular, with courtyards for family activities and storage areas for grain, livestock, and water. Evidence from tablets and remains indicates a structured society, with specialized craftspeople producing pottery, textiles, and bronze tools. The architecture reflects both practical concerns and aesthetic choices, with simple decorations adorning walls and pottery patterns hinting at symbolic meaning. Daily life in Mitanni revolved around agriculture, animal husbandry, and military training. Wheat and barley were the primary crops, supplemented by lentils, chickpeas, and vegetables. Cattle, sheep, and goats grazed in the plains, while horses received particular attention, given their significance for war and status. The elite maintained stables for breeding and training chariot horses, producing highly skilled cavalry capable of rapid maneuvering in battle. Craftspeople worked in small workshops, creating bronze weapons, ceremonial vessels, and pottery, while merchants facilitated trade both within the kingdom and with distant neighbors. Food preparation and communal meals formed part of the social rhythm, while religious observances marked seasonal cycles and royal events. The Mitanni were also distinguished by their contributions to military innovation and diplomacy. Chariot warfare was central, with elite units trained in speed, precision, and coordinated attacks. Weapons included bronze swords, spears, and composite bows, with armor made from leather and metal scales. These forces enabled Mitanni to assert influence over border regions and negotiate from a position of strength.
Treaties with Egypt and the Hittites document the importance of military reputation, strategic marriages, and the careful management of vassal territories. Mitanni kings also maintained archives of administrative records, detailing land grants, taxation, and legal matters, revealing a society attentive to governance as well as conquest. Trade and economy were crucial, with Mitanni positioned along significant east-west and north-south routes. Copper, tin, and gold were imported and refined locally, while agricultural surpluses supported urban populations and armies. Pottery, textiles, and chariot components were exchanged with neighboring regions, sustaining both economic and political networks. The kingdom's prosperity depended on this careful orchestration of production, exchange, and military protection, allowing it to maintain autonomy amidst powerful neighbors. Religious life in Mitanni combined Hurrian traditions with Indo-Aryan influences. Deities such as Teshub, the storm god, and Mitra, Varuna, and Indra appear in rituals and treaty invocations. Priests performed ceremonies in temples and open-air sanctuaries, offering sacrifices and invoking divine favor for the king and the kingdom. Religious observances were closely tied to agriculture, warfare, and governance, reflecting a worldview in which divine order guided human affairs. Inscriptions and tablets indicate that rituals were formalized, carefully recorded, and integrated into the administration of the kingdom, suggesting a society in which spiritual life and statecraft were intertwined. Despite its achievements, the Mitanni kingdom remains partially obscured by time. Archaeologists continue to debate the full extent of its territory, the precise nature of its political structure, and the role of Indo-Aryan influence in royal culture. Many of the administrative tablets survive in fragmentary form, leaving gaps in knowledge about everyday life, social hierarchies, and internal politics. Archaeological remains of fortresses and palaces hint at grandeur, but much has been lost to erosion, conquest, and centuries of river flooding. Scholars reconstruct its history primarily through Egyptian and Hittite correspondence, alongside material evidence from excavations, producing a narrative both detailed and incomplete, leaving room for contemplation. The sudden decline of Mitanni remains another area of inquiry. In the late 14th century BCE, pressures from Assyrian expansion, internal strife, and shifts in trade routes contributed to the kingdom's fragmentation. Cities were abandoned, fortresses fell into ruin, and political structures dissolved. The disappearance was gradual rather than abrupt, leaving traces of culture and technology that influenced neighboring states, but allowing the kingdom itself to fade from prominence. Its legacy persists in the study of Indo-Aryan names, horse training manuals, diplomatic strategies, and archaeological remains that silently testify to its former sophistication. Walking through the sites of Mitanni today, one imagines quiet streets, stables where horses trained in disciplined routines, and workshops where artisans shaped bronze and clay. The walls of palaces and citadels echo with the faintest memory of ritual, negotiation, and daily labor. Fields once tilled by farmers now lie fallow, yet the irrigation channels and earthworks remain as subtle guides, tracing the ingenuity of human planning and adaptation. Each fragment, tablet, wall, or pottery shard carries a story, inviting reflection on how civilizations rise, interact, and fade into quiet memory. Mitanni's contributions to regional history, though often overshadowed by neighboring Egypt and the Hittites, are significant. Its military innovations, particularly in chariotry, shaped strategies used for centuries. Administrative practices informed the governance of subsequent kingdoms. Religious rituals influenced local traditions, blending.
The Nabata culture, centered at Tel Brak in what is now northeastern Syria, represents one of the earliest complex proto-urban societies, flourishing around 4000 BCE. Long before the fully developed city-states of Mesopotamia, Nabata exhibited signs of organized settlement, monumental architecture, and symbolic expression, hinting at social hierarchies and communal planning. Its location in the fertile plains near the Habur River provided access to water, game, and fertile soil, allowing populations to grow and agriculture to expand. Archaeological work at Tel Brak has revealed concentric settlements, temples, and residential areas, suggesting a community aware of both functional and ceremonial needs. The emergence of Nabata can be understood in the context of growing populations and the need for coordinated resource management. As families and clans settled near the river, they cultivated barley, wheat, and legumes, and developed rudimentary irrigation to support crops during dry seasons. The region's natural resources, clay for pottery, reeds for construction, and timber from nearby forests, were exploited systematically. Excavations reveal that settlements were arranged with careful attention to movement and access, with larger structures likely serving communal, religious, or administrative purposes. Evidence also suggests trade and contact with neighboring cultures, including early Mesopotamian centers, facilitating the exchange of goods and ideas. Daily life in Nabata was structured around both sustenance and ceremony. Houses were generally rectangular, with mud brick walls and small courtyards. Families cooked over open hearths, stored grains in clay containers, and tended to livestock such as goats, sheep, and cattle. Clothing was simple, made from woven reeds or fibers, occasionally decorated with shells or beads. Food consisted primarily of cultivated grains and pulses, supplemented by hunted game and foraged fruits. Ceremonial practices appear to have been integral to community life, with temples or platforms used for offerings and gatherings, indicating a connection between social cohesion and religious observance. Art and symbolism provide insight into Nabata's worldview. Among the most striking finds are the so-called eye idols, small alabaster figurines with exaggerated eyes, interpreted as protective or ritual objects. Their prevalence across residential and ceremonial sites suggests a symbiotic system linking the spiritual, social, and domestic spheres. Pottery was functional, yet often decorated with geometric patterns or incised motifs, reflecting aesthetic sensibilities and possibly indicating status or lineage. Stone tools and small bronze objects were used for daily labor and craft, demonstrating a careful balance between utility and artistic expression. Technology and economy were modest but significant for the era. Tools made from flint, obsidian, and early copper facilitated agriculture, woodworking, and textile production. Clay kilns produced pottery for storage, cooking, and trade. Agricultural surplus allowed for some specialization of labor, with certain individuals focusing on craft production or ceremonial duties. Trade networks, though not as extensive as in later kingdoms, connected Nabata to distant regions, likely exchanging pottery, grains, and craft goods. The settlement layout itself reflects planning and resource management, emphasizing irrigation, food storage, and communal infrastructure as central to survival and growth. The organization of Nabata hints at early social hierarchies. Larger houses and ceremonial structures may have housed community leaders or priests, while smaller dwellings accommodated extended families or laborers. The concentration of symbolic objects, such as the eye idols, within specific areas suggests delineation of sacred space and controlled access to religious practice. Decisions about resource distribution, irrigation management, and construction would have required collective coordination, implying leadership structures that balanced authority with communal needs. Despite these insights, many mysteries remain. The exact function of the eye idols is still debated, with some scholars proposing protective, ritual, or even symbolic communicative roles. The absence of written records leaves daily language, administrative practices, and detailed social norms largely unknown. Archaeological gaps make it difficult to reconstruct the full extent of trade networks or interactions with neighboring cultures. The sudden development of complex structures at Tel Brak, followed by shifts in settlement patterns, raises questions about population pressures, environmental change, or socio-political dynamics that influence the evolution of the culture. One of the most intriguing aspects of Nabata is its urban planning, predating many contemporaneous city-states. Concentric rings of streets and dwellings suggest intentional organization, balancing defense, access, and ceremonial needs.
Temples or platforms were strategically placed, possibly to dominate visual perspectives or to facilitate gatherings. Such arrangements indicate an understanding of social space and communal priorities, revealing early experimentation with urban design that would influence later Mesopotamian civilizations. Religious and ceremonial life appears deeply integrated into daily existence. Offerings, altars, and ritual objects were likely used to ensure agricultural fertility, protect the community, or honor deities or spirits. The combination of domestic, ceremonial, and symbolic spaces within the settlement suggests a worldview where sacred and mundane aspects of life were intertwined, each informing the other. This integration reflects a sophisticated cultural mindset capable of blending practical survival with symbolic expression and communal identity. Trade and external contexts remain partially understood. Evidence of imported materials, including shells, stones, and pigments, indicate interaction with distant regions. Such exchanges likely brought new ideas, technologies, and cultural influences, contributing to the development of social complexity. The management of these networks, even in small forms, demonstrates an awareness of connectivity and the benefits of strategic alliances, foreshadowing the extensive trade and diplomacy that would characterize later city-states. The decline and transformation of Nabata are equally mysteries. Settlements at Tel Brak show phases of abandonment and reoccupation, with shifting population centers and changes in architecture. Environmental pressures, shifting river courses, or external conflicts may have influenced these changes. The transition from Nabata proto-urban society to later Urdunite Mesopotamian city-states illustrates the gradual evolution of social complexity, resource management, and symbolic practice, leaving behind only fragments of what must have been a vibrant and dynamic culture. Walking through the remnants of Tel Brak today, one can sense a quiet pulse of human effort. Mounds of earth mark former houses, ceremonial platforms, and streets. Clay fragments, stone tools, and alabaster.
The Tartessos civilization, located in what is now southern Spain, along the Guadalquivir and Guadalete river valleys, emerged during the Late Bronze Age, roughly between 1000 and 500 BCE. Tartessos was a wealthy and enigmatic society, notable for its rich silver and mineral resources, expansive trade networks, and complex social structures. Its cities, now lost to the shifting landscapes and river courses, once flourished near the estuaries and riverbanks, where fertile alluvial soils supported agriculture and navigable waterways enabled commerce with distant Mediterranean cultures. Ancient sources, including Greek and Roman writers, describe Tartessos as a place of extraordinary wealth, brimming with silver, gold, and skilled craftsmanship, though much of its history remains shrouded in mystery. Archaeological research in southern Iberia reveals traces of urban centers, fortified settlements, and burial mounds indicative of a hierarchical society. Tartessos emerged in the context of regional metallurgical expertise, connecting local traditions with influences from Phoenician traders who established coastal enclaves. These interactions facilitated the exchange of metals, pottery, and writing systems. The civilization's location, bridging inland mineral-rich regions with maritime trade routes, allowed it to thrive economically while maintaining distinct cultural practices. Though no written records produced by Tartessos survive, inscriptions in Phoenician script suggest literacy and administrative capabilities, offering glimpses into a society capable of managing wealth, trade, and civic organization. Daily life in Tartessos appears to have revolved around agriculture, metalworking, and trade. Farmers cultivated wheat, barley, legumes, and olives, while herders maintained flocks of sheep, goats, and cattle. Fishing and salt extraction supplemented diets near coastal regions. Houses were constructed from local stone and timber, often organized around courtyards that allowed work and domestic activities to occur simultaneously. Clothing was likely woven from wool or flax, practical for daily labor yet adorned with metal or decorative elements to signify status. Ceremonial attire for elites may have included jewelry crafted from silver or gold, reflecting the society's metallurgical sophistication.
Rituals and religious practices were integral to the Tartessian worldview. Sacred spaces, though yet largely undiscovered, likely included temples or ritual enclosures near rivers and elevated grounds where offerings of metals, ceramics, and agricultural produce were made. Funerary practices involved burial mounds and chambers for elite individuals, accompanied by goods and ornaments reflecting their status. Artifacts recovered from tombs and settlements, including finely crafted jewelry, ceramics, and metal objects, suggest a society deeply attuned to symbolism, spiritual practice, and social hierarchy, balancing daily subsistence with ceremonial life. Metallurgy and trade were central to Tartessos' economy. Silver, gold, and tin were mined from nearby mountains and river valleys, refined locally, and exported through Phoenician and Mediterranean networks. Artisans created intricate jewelry, ceremonial objects, and functional tools, combining technical skill with artistic expression. The wealth generated by these activities supported urban development, fortifications, and elite lifestyles. Agricultural surplus enabled specialization of labor, ensuring that metalworkers, potters, and traders could focus on their crafts while the majority engaged in cultivation and herding. The Tartessian civilization also engaged in long-distance trade, connecting with the Phoenicians, Greeks, and later Carthaginians. Goods such as metals, ceramics, wine, and olive oil moved along riverways and coastal routes, creating a dynamic economy sustained by both local production and international exchange. Trade allowed for cultural transmission, introducing writing systems, artistic motifs, and technological innovations, which Tartessos adapted and integrated within its own traditions. The combination of inland resources and maritime accessibility provided resilience over several centuries. Yet, despite these achievements, Tartessos is enveloped in mystery. Its writing system, sometimes referred to as the Tartessian script, has been partially deciphered but remains largely obscure, leaving much of its literature, administrative records, and cultural narratives unknown. The exact location of major urban centers is still debated, with shifting river courses and alluvial deposits concealing remnants of streets, buildings, and fortifications. The sudden decline of Tartessos, noted by ancient sources, raises questions about environmental changes, shifting trade networks, or potential invasions. Scholars continue to search for explanations, piecing together fragments of material culture and classical references to reconstruct its history. Tartessos' artistic expression also presents puzzles. Pottery decorations, metalwork designs, and jewelry motifs reveal influences from Phoenician and Mediterranean neighbors while retaining unique stylistic traits. Religious symbols and ritual objects suggest belief systems deeply connected to natural cycles, metallurgy, and trade wealth. The combination of imported techniques and indigenous creativity reflects a civilization both open to external influence and committed to its own cultural identity, producing an aesthetic that was both functional and emblematic. Ancient sources, including Greek and Roman writers, describe Tartessos as a place of extraordinary wealth, brimming with silver, gold, and skilled craftsmanship, though much of its history remains shrouded in mystery. Archaeological research in southern Iberia reveals traces of urban centers, fortified settlements, and burial mounds indicative of a hierarchical society. Tartessos emerged in the context of regional metallurgical expertise, connecting local traditions with influences from Phoenician traders who established coastal enclaves. These interactions facilitated the exchange of metals, pottery, and writing systems. The civilization's location, bridging inland mineral-rich regions with maritime trade routes, allowed it to thrive economically while maintaining distinct cultural practices. Though no written records produced by Tartessos survive, inscriptions in Phoenician script suggest literacy and administrative capabilities, offering glimpses into a society capable of managing wealth, trade, and civic organization. Daily life in Tartessos appears to have revolved around agriculture, metalworking, and trade. Farmers cultivated wheat, barley, legumes, and olives, while herders maintained flocks of sheep, goats, and cattle. Fishing and salt extraction supplemented diets near coastal regions. Houses were constructed from local stone and timber, often organized around courtyards that allowed work and domestic activities to occur simultaneously. Clothing was likely woven from wool or flax, practical for daily labor yet adorned with metal or decorative elements to signify status. Ceremonial attire for elites may have included jewelry crafted from silver or gold, reflecting the society's metallurgical sophistication. Rituals and religious practices were integral to the Tartessian worldview. Sacred spaces, though yet largely undiscovered, likely included temples or ritual enclosures near rivers and elevated grounds, where offerings of metals, ceramics, and agricultural produce were made. Funerary practices involved burial mounds and chambers for elite individuals, accompanied by goods and ornaments reflecting their status. Artifacts recovered from tombs and settlements, including finely crafted jewelry, ceramics, and metal objects, suggest a society deeply attuned to symbolism, spiritual practice, and social hierarchy, balancing daily subsistence with ceremonial life. Metallurgy and trade were central to Tartesso's economy. Silver, gold, and tin were mined from nearby mountains and river valleys, refined locally and exported through Phoenician and Mediterranean networks. Artisans created intricate jewelry, ceremonial objects, and functional tools, combining technical skill with artistic expression. The wealth generated by these activities supported urban development, fortifications, and elite lifestyles. Agricultural surplus enabled specialization of labor, ensuring that metal workers, potters, and
The Philistine Pentapolis consisted of 5 fortified cities along the southern Levantine coast: Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath. Flourishing roughly between 1200 and 600 BCE, the Philistines were a people of Aegean origin who migrated into the Levant, bringing distinctive cultural practices, metallurgical skills, and urban organization. Their settlements were strategically located near coastal plains and fertile valleys, allowing control over maritime trade, agriculture, and communication routes. Archaeological excavations reveal substantial fortifications, regular street grids, and residential quarters, demonstrating an understanding of both defense and civic planning. The cities formed a loose confederation, maintaining both political autonomy and cultural cohesion, while interacting with neighboring Canaanite and Israelite populations. The Philistine emergence in the southern Levant is linked to wider population movements associated with the late Bronze Age collapse in the eastern Mediterranean. The arrival of Aegean peoples introduced new technologies, styles of pottery, and religious practices. Settlements quickly adapted to the local environment, utilizing nearby clay for construction, rivers for irrigation, and fertile soil for cultivation. The urban cores often contained administrative and ceremonial buildings, including shrines and marketplaces. Their architectural style blended imported elements with indigenous methods, producing unique fortifications and domestic layouts. Evidence suggests a sophisticated knowledge of stonework, mud brick construction, and the practical needs of both defense and daily life. Daily life in the Philistine cities centered on agriculture, trade, craft, and communal ritual. Families cultivated wheat, barley, and legumes while tending vineyards and olive groves. Sheep, goats, and cattle provided dairy, meat, and leather, and fishing along the coast supplemented protein intake. Houses were organized around central courtyards, supporting cooking, weaving, and family gatherings. Clothing consisted of woven fabrics, occasionally decorated with imported dyes, and was suited to the Mediterranean climate. Workshops within cities produced pottery, metal tools, and weapons, while communal areas facilitated exchange, social interaction, and religious observance. Ceremonial life included offerings, shrines, and processions, often integrated with the agricultural calendar and civic rituals. Artistic expression and material culture were notable aspects of Philistine identity. Pottery styles, particularly the so-called Philistine bitch-chrome ware, displayed distinctive red and black decoration, echoing Aegean origins while adapting to local traditions. Metalworking, including bronze and iron implements, facilitated daily tasks, warfare, and ceremonial use. Jewelry, seals, and figurines suggest both symbolic and aesthetic intentions, reflecting a culture attentive to identity, status, and spiritual representation.
Symbols in architecture and artifacts often highlight connections to Aegean heritage, yet localized adaptations reveal integration with Levantine environments and neighboring populations. Military organization was crucial to the survival and influence of the Philistine Pentapolis. Each city maintained fortified walls, watchtowers, and strategically positioned gates, reflecting awareness of both internal and external threats. Chariots and infantry played roles in defense, and evidence of iron weaponry indicates technical competence and adaptation to evolving warfare. The Confederation allowed coordinated defense while preserving local autonomy, allowing cities to respond flexibly to shifting alliances, incursions, and regional conflicts. Warfare and diplomacy were deeply intertwined, with treaties, tribute, and negotiated settlements forming part of their political landscape. Trade and economy extended beyond local subsistence. The Philistines engaged in coastal and inland commerce, exchanging metals, ceramics, agricultural products, and crafted items with Egyptians, Canaanites, and other Levantine populations. Their ports facilitated maritime trade, connecting the eastern Mediterranean with inland regions. Economic specialization supported artisans, metallurgists, and merchants, allowing some individuals to focus on craft or administration, while the majority tended to agriculture and animal husbandry. The flow of goods and materials contributed to urban growth, social stratification, and cultural exchange. Religious practice in the Philistine Pentapolis combined Aegean and local Levantine elements. Temples and shrines were constructed with stone and mud brick, containing altars, figurines, and ritual implements. Evidence of sacrifices, offerings, and ceremonial artifacts suggest devotion to multiple deities, possibly including sea and fertility gods, while localized adaptations incorporated regional beliefs. Religious spaces were carefully integrated into city layouts, providing focal points for communal gatherings, ritual observance, and civic identity. Practices reflected both inherited traditions and ongoing adaptation to the new environment, blending continuity with innovation. Several mysteries persist regarding the Philistines. The precise origins of their migration remain debated, as do the mechanisms by which they maintained cultural cohesion while adopting local influences. Genetic studies indicate a mix of Aegean and Levantine ancestry, but population dynamics, intermarriage patterns, and assimilation processes are not fully understood. Archaeologists continue to investigate the function and distribution of artifacts, urban layouts, and burial practices, seeking insight into the balance between local integration and imported cultural identity. The absence of extensive written records leaves significant gaps in understanding political organization, social norms, and daily practices. Burial practices pose further mysteries. Excavations reveal tombs and cemeteries with varying levels of richness, including pottery, jewelry, and weapons. Some tombs suggest elite status, while others appear communal or familial. Funerary rituals may have reflected beliefs about the afterlife, social hierarchy, and ancestral veneration. Differences in grave goods and architecture indicate social stratification, yet the criteria and decision-making behind these variations remain subjects of research and interpretation. The archaeological record offers clues but rarely definitive answers, leaving space for contemplation and inference. Urban organization across the 5 cities exhibits both standardization and adaptation. Streets, residential compounds, marketplaces, and administrative areas reveal thoughtful planning. Yet topography and resource distribution influenced variations. Defensive architecture, including walls, bastions, and gates, was responsive to strategic needs, while ceremonial areas occupied prominent positions. The combination of Aegean and Levantine architectural elements reflects cultural synthesis, demonstrating how migration, environment, and tradition interacted to produce functional yet symbolically significant urban landscapes. The eventual decline of the Philistine Pentapolis is partially documented through historical texts, including Hebrew narratives and Assyrian records. Conquests, shifts in trade routes, and integration into larger empires gradually eroded city autonomy. Some cities were abandoned while others persisted under foreign dominion, maintaining partial cultural continuity. The timing and processes of decline are still debated, with environmental, military, and political factors all likely contributing. Despite the loss of independence, the Philistine legacy persisted in local material culture, trade knowledge, and urban frameworks. Walking through the archaeological sites today, one can imagine bustling streets lined with workshops, homes, and shrines. Farmers and
The Mari Kingdom, situated along the middle Euphrates River in modern-day Syria, flourished during the early to mid-2nd millennium BCE, approximately between 2900 and 1759 BCE. Mari became a pivotal center for trade, diplomacy, and administration, serving as a cultural and economic bridge between Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the Levant. Its strategic riverside location allowed access to fertile alluvial plains, supporting agriculture and sustaining large populations. Excavations at the site reveal a sprawling urban settlement characterized by monumental palaces, administrative buildings, temples, and residential districts, illustrating a civilization of both practical organization and ceremonial sophistication. The emergence of Mari as a kingdom was shaped by its position at the crossroads of multiple trade and cultural corridors. The Euphrates provided not only water for irrigation, but also navigable routes for the movement of goods, people, and ideas. Early settlements evolved from simple farming communities into complex urban centers, gradually developing centralized governance, bureaucratic systems, and social hierarchies. Clay tablet archives indicate that kings and administrators meticulously recorded transactions, treaties, and legal matters, demonstrating advanced literacy and structured governance. The discovery of over 25,000 clay tablets underscores the kingdom's role as a hub of political and economic activity. Daily life in Mari involved a careful balance of agriculture, craft, trade, and ritual observance. Families cultivated grains, legumes, dates, and vegetables while tending sheep, goats, and cattle. Fishing along the Euphrates supplemented protein sources, and fruit orchards and date palms contributed to diet and trade. Houses were constructed of mud brick with flat roofs organized around central courtyards, where domestic tasks, weaving, and social interaction occurred. Clothing was woven from wool and linen, often dyed with natural pigments, while elite individuals adorned themselves with jewelry, ornate headdresses, and ceremonial garments. Markets and workshops provided spaces for craftsmen to produce pottery, tools, and textiles, which circulated locally and regionally. Religious and ceremonial life permeated Mari, with temples dedicated to regional deities and ancestral spirits. Archaeological evidence indicates the performance of offerings, seasonal ceremonies, and ritual feasts, often linked to agricultural cycles. Temples contained altars, clay figurines, and inscribed objects that reflected both spiritual devotion and societal structure. Funerary practices included burial within designated cemeteries or under domestic floors, accompanied by grave goods that indicate status, occupation, and religious affiliation. Symbolic artifacts, including cylinder seals and ceremonial objects, reveal a rich visual language that communicated authority, protection, and spiritual connection. Technological achievements and economic organization in Mari were sophisticated for the period. Tools and implements were crafted from stone, copper, and bronze, supporting agriculture, construction, and craft production. Pottery kilns produced functional and decorative vessels for storage, cooking, and trade. Agricultural techniques included irrigation canals and water management systems, ensuring crop stability along the Euphrates floodplain. Trade networks extended from Anatolia and Mesopotamia to the Levant, exchanging textiles, metals, timber, and luxury goods. The kingdom's economy relied on both local production and the circulation of imported materials, with administrative oversight recorded on clay tablets. The political system of Mari reflected both central authority and regional coordination.
Kings resided in monumental palaces that combined administrative, ceremonial, and residential functions. Officials and scribes maintained extensive records of taxation, trade, and diplomacy, revealing a bureaucracy capable of managing large populations and diverse economic activity. Conflicts and alliances with neighboring states such as Ebla, Akkad, and Assyria demonstrate strategic diplomacy alongside military readiness. Fortifications, city walls, and garrison structures indicate awareness of external threats, while urban planning reflects both functionality and symbolic representation of authority. One of the most remarkable features of Mari is the vast palace complex, sometimes referred to as the Palace of Zimri-Lim. With more than 260 rooms, the palace included administrative offices, reception halls, ceremonial spaces, and private quarters. Wall paintings depict rituals, banquets, and courtly life, providing visual testimony to cultural and political sophistication. The complex also housed archives containing thousands of clay tablets detailing correspondence with foreign rulers, trade agreements, and legal matters. These records reveal the kingdom's integration into wider Mesopotamian political and economic networks and illuminate aspects of governance, law, and social structure that were unprecedented for the time. Trade and external contacts contributed significantly to the kingdom's prosperity. Mari's position along the Euphrates facilitated exchange of grain, textiles, metals, and ceramics. Relationships with neighboring states, documented in letters and treaties, illustrate the kingdom's diplomatic influence and its ability to negotiate trade and political alliances. Imported materials such as copper from Anatolia and timber from distant regions were integrated into local production, reflecting both adaptability and sophistication. Trade was closely managed by the administrative elite, ensuring equitable distribution, taxation, and record-keeping, contributing to the overall stability of the kingdom. Despite its achievements, Mari also faced persistent challenges. Environmental fluctuations such as floods or droughts could disrupt agriculture and supply networks. Military threats from neighboring states and nomadic groups required continuous vigilance and defense planning. Internal management of large urban populations, social hierarchy, and ceremonial obligations demanded administrative efficiency. Archaeological evidence of sudden destruction layers suggests that conflict and political upheaval may have contributed to the eventual decline of the kingdom, highlighting the fragility of even highly organized urban centers. Walking through the remains of Mari today, the imagination reconstructs streets lined with mud brick homes, bustling marketplaces, workshops, and temple courtyards. Farmers tend fields and orchards, artisans shape vessels and tools, scribes carefully inscribe clay tablets, and priests perform rituals in temple precincts. The river flows steadily, sustaining life, trade, and ritual observance. Fortified walls stand as reminders of
The Dilmun civilization, centered in the region of modern-day Bahrain and parts of the eastern Arabian Gulf, emerged as a significant trading hub around 3000 BCE, flourishing until roughly 1800 BCE. Positioned strategically along maritime routes linking Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley, Dilmun became a vital conduit for commerce, culture, and exchange of ideas. The civilization's settlements were primarily coastal and island-based, capitalizing on natural harbors and fertile areas suitable for agriculture and freshwater resources. Archaeological evidence indicates urban planning with streets, residential compounds, temples, and burial grounds, reflecting a society attentive to both daily needs and ceremonial structures. Dilmun's rise was closely tied to its geographic position. The archipelago and surrounding coastal regions allowed control over maritime trade, while proximity to date palms, freshwater springs, and arable land sustained local populations. Early settlers adapted to challenging environments, constructing dwellings with stone and mud brick, and managing water through wells and irrigation systems. Evidence suggests that Dilmun maintained connections with Sumerian city-states, exchanging copper, dates, pearls, and luxury goods. The civilization was recognized by Mesopotamian texts as a prosperous and semi-mythical land of purity, often associated with notions of paradise, sacred springs, and longevity. Daily life in Dilmun encompassed agriculture, craft, trade, and ritual observance. Farmers cultivated dates, barley, wheat, and legumes, while herders managed goats, sheep, and cattle. Fishing and shellfish gathering supplemented diets along the coast. Houses were typically single-story structures with courtyards, supporting domestic activities, weaving, and food preparation. Clothing consisted of woven textiles, occasionally adorned with decorative elements to indicate status. Artisans produced pottery, tools, jewelry, and ceremonial items, demonstrating both functional skill and aesthetic awareness. Public spaces facilitated trade, social interaction, and communal gatherings, creating a rhythm of daily life intertwined with environmental and spiritual considerations. Religious practice was central to Dilmun culture. Temples and ceremonial sites were often located near freshwater springs or elevated areas, reinforcing symbolic connections between water, fertility, and divinity. Offerings, figurines, and ritual objects reflect devotion to deities associated with agriculture, trade, and protection. Funerary practices included burial mounds and chambers for elites, accompanied by goods such as pottery, ornaments, and tools. These ritualized practices reveal an intricate worldview in which daily labor, trade, and spirituality were intertwined, emphasizing both practical survival and metaphysical reflection. Trade and economic activity were the lifeblood of Dilmun. Its position along key maritime routes enabled exchange between Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and the Arabian Peninsula. Commodities such as copper, timber, pearls, and luxury goods were imported and exported, while local products, including dates and shells, supported both subsistence and trade. Evidence of merchant records and commercial seals suggests sophisticated administrative systems for managing transactions, taxation, and goods transport. The economy facilitated specialization, allowing artisans, metalworkers, and traders to focus on craft, while agriculture supported the broader population. Technological achievement in Dilmun included advanced metallurgy, ceramics, and urban infrastructure. Copper from Oman was processed and distributed through ports, enabling tool making, weaponry, and trade goods. Pottery kilns produced vessels with both functional and decorative uses, while stone and mud brick construction ensured durable residences and ceremonial buildings. Water management was critical, with wells, canals, and reservoirs sustaining both domestic and agricultural needs in a semi-arid environment. These achievements indicate a civilization capable of integrating environmental adaptation, technological skill, and social organization to maintain stability and prosperity. Political organization in Dilmun is partially understood through both archaeological evidence and Mesopotamian texts. The civilization appears to have been a loose confederation of city-states or settlements, each governed by local leaders or elites who coordinated trade, defense, and ritual. Diplomatic relations with neighboring powers, particularly Sumerian city-states, indicate strategic awareness and negotiation of influence. Fortifications, administrative buildings, and ceremonial structures point to both civic control and religious authority, suggesting a society in which governance, economy, and spiritual practice were interconnected. Despite its prosperity, Dilmun's history is punctuated by mysteries and unresolved questions. Archaeologists continue to debate the precise extent of urban centers, the locations of trade hubs, and the details of social hierarchy. While Mesopotamian texts describe Dilmun as a sacred land of abundance and purity, physical evidence is incomplete, leaving gaps in understanding daily life, governance, and ritual observance. The eventual decline of Dilmun, roughly around 1800 BCE, may have resulted from shifts in trade routes, environmental changes, or political pressures, though exact causes remain uncertain.
Scholars reconstruct its narrative from fragmented archaeological remains and references in external texts. The material culture of Dilmun offers insights into both daily existence and ceremonial practice. Pottery, seals, tools, and ornaments indicate specialized craftsmanship, while burial artifacts reveal social stratification and religious continuity. Symbolic imagery, often depicting marine motifs, animals, or fertility symbols, underscores connections between the natural environment, spiritual belief, and cultural expression. Urban layouts and architectural patterns suggest deliberate planning, balancing defense, habitation, and ceremonial function. The integration of aesthetic considerations with practical needs demonstrates an attentiveness to both beauty and utility within the society. Environmental adaptation shaped Dilmun's settlement and livelihood. Freshwater availability, fertile coastal plains, and maritime access allowed the civilization to thrive in a region of limited rainfall. Agricultural systems, including irrigation and crop rotation, supported sustainable food production. Maritime expertise facilitated fishing, transportation, and trade. These adaptations reveal an intimate understanding of local resources, climate patterns, and the interdependence between natural environment and societal stability. The civilization's endurance for over a millennium reflects the effectiveness of these strategies in balancing human needs with ecological realities. Trade, both regional and long distance, was a defining characteristic of Dilmun.
The Lycians inhabited the rugged southern coast of what is now Turkey, flourishing between approximately 1500 and 400 BCE. Nestled among steep mountains, deep valleys, and the Mediterranean coastline, their settlements were adapted to dramatic topography, with towns perched on rocky ridges and fortified against both human and natural threats. The Lycians maintained an identity distinct from surrounding Anatolian populations, developing unique political, architectural, and cultural characteristics. Their civilization is known through archaeology, inscriptions, and classical sources, providing insight into their governance, daily life, and interactions with neighboring powers such as the Persians, Greeks, and Phoenicians. Lycian's emergence as a distinct civilization resulted from both geographic isolation and strategic coastal positioning. Mountainous terrain provided natural defenses, while fertile valleys and access to the Mediterranean facilitated agriculture, trade, and communication. Early settlements evolved from small hilltop villages to organized towns, with stone houses, temples, and communal spaces arranged to maximize safety and resource use. Archaeological discoveries reveal rock-cut tombs, fortifications, and urban streets, demonstrating careful planning and adaptation to the environment. Inscriptions in the Lycian language offer a record of civic matters, legal codes, and religious practices, although full linguistic comprehension remains limited. Daily life in Lycia was intertwined with both the landscape and the Mediterranean climate. Agriculture focused on cereals, olives, grapes, and legumes, supported by irrigation where possible. Herding of goats and sheep provided milk, meat, and wool, while coastal fishing supplemented diets and trade goods. Houses were typically stone-built, often 2 stories, with courtyards and terraces used for domestic tasks and family gatherings. Clothing included wool and linen garments, occasionally decorated with dyed patterns. Communities maintained workshops for pottery, metalwork, and textile production, integrating domestic and commercial activity into a cohesive social rhythm. Religious and ceremonial practice was a vital component of Lycian life. Temples, shrines, and rock-cut tombs reflect devotion to both local deities and ancestral spirits. Burial practices included elaborate tombs carved into cliffs or constructed as freestanding monuments, often adorned with relief sculptures depicting civic or heroic imagery. Funerary rituals emphasized lineage, status, and spiritual continuity, with grave goods illustrating both material wealth and symbolic meaning. Community festivals and seasonal rituals reinforced social cohesion, reflecting an awareness of natural cycles, agricultural productivity, and divine favor. Technological and economic aspects of Lycian civilization were notable for their adaptation to a challenging environment. Stone masonry allowed the construction of durable fortifications, homes, and tombs. Metalworking provided tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects, while pottery kilns produced both functional vessels and artistic forms. Agriculture was enhanced by terracing, irrigation, and careful water management, enabling food security on uneven terrain. Maritime skills supported fishing, trade, and travel along the coast, connecting Lycia with regional powers and facilitating cultural and material exchange. Networks of inland paths linked villages and towns to these maritime routes, integrating the entire region. Political organization in Lycia was characterized by a federation of city-states, each maintaining local autonomy while participating in broader confederations. Councils, assemblies, and elected magistrates appear in inscriptions, demonstrating a unique system of governance that combined local self-rule with collective decision-making. Kings or dynastic leaders existed in some cities, yet civic assemblies often wielded authority over law, taxation, and defense. Fortifications, administrative buildings, and ceremonial spaces reflected both practical and symbolic dimensions of governance, emphasizing security, civic pride, and religious observance. Art and architecture were integral to Lycian cultural identity. Rock-cut tombs, often in the shape of temple facades or elevated sarcophagi, exhibit both artistic skill and symbolic representation of status. Relief sculptures depict mythological, civic, or heroic imagery, while domestic architecture balances functionality and aesthetic considerations. Pottery, metalwork, and jewelry demonstrate local styles infused with influences from Greece, Phoenicia, and Anatolia, reflecting a civilization engaged in regional exchange, yet maintaining a distinct visual language. Public and private spaces were designed to integrate utility, social hierarchy, and ceremonial function. The Lycians' military organization adapted to the mountainous terrain and strategic coastline. Infantry, fortifications, and defensive positions leveraged natural topography for protection against invasions. Naval activity supported trade and coastal defense, while alliances with neighboring powers offered strategic security. Evidence suggests participation in larger regional conflicts, including Persian campaigns, demonstrating both martial capability and political acumen. Military preparedness was integrated into daily life, with towns maintaining watchtowers, walls, and armaments while still supporting agriculture, craft, and trade. Several enduring mysteries surround Lycian civilization. The full extent of their confederation, the precise interpretation of inscriptions, and the details of their decline remain subjects of scholarly investigation. The relationship between mountain settlements and coastal towns, the mechanisms of political coordination, and the evolution of religious practice are partially understood, with much inferred from archaeology. Despite these uncertainties, material culture and urban remains provide a coherent sense of social structure, technological adaptation, and regional influence. Walking through Lycian sites today evokes the contours of a civilization intricately linked to its environment. Cliffside tombs rise above valleys, stone houses line terraced slopes, and workshops reveal the daily rhythms of life. Olive groves, vineyards, and cultivated fields stretch between settlements. Temples and shrines sit amid homes and public spaces, blending spiritual and civic concerns. The rhythm of life, agriculture, craft, ritual, trade, and governance echoes quietly through the stones and artifacts left behind. The Lycians exemplify the integration of geography, culture, and governance in early urban societies. Their adaptation to mountainous terrain. The Samnites were a confederation of Italic tribes inhabiting the central and southern Apennine Mountains of Italy, thriving between approximately the 6th and 3rd centuries BCE. Their territory, characterized by rugged hills, valleys, and forested slopes, provided both protection and natural resources. The Samnites maintained an independent cultural identity, distinct from the emerging Roman state, and were known for their fierce warriors, hilltop settlements, and intricate social organization. Archaeological evidence, combined with Roman historical accounts, reveals a society skilled in agriculture, metallurgy, warfare, and ceremonial practice, capable of resisting external domination for centuries. Samnite settlements were strategically placed on elevated terrain, allowing observation of valleys and approach routes. Fortified villages, or oppida, were constructed with stone walls, terraces, and defensive gates, reflecting awareness of both intertribal competition and external threats. Early habitation began with simple structures of wood and stone, evolving into organized communities with streets, public spaces, and central meeting areas. These settlements demonstrate planning adapted to topography, with water management, cultivation terraces, and paths linking individual villages and trade routes throughout the region. Daily life in Samnite society was shaped by agriculture, pastoralism, craft, and communal ritual. Families cultivated cereals, legumes, and fruits while maintaining herds of sheep, goats, and cattle on terraced hillsides. Hunting supplemented protein intake, and foraging provided medicinal and culinary plants. Houses were generally rectangular, stone, or mud brick structures, often grouped around courtyards for domestic tasks, storage, and social activity. Clothing consisted of woven wool and linen, with decorated borders for status or ceremonial use. Workshops for pottery, metal tools, and weaponry reflected both subsistence needs and martial culture, integrating craft into everyday routines. The Samnite spiritual and ceremonial life intertwined with their environment and social hierarchy. Religious practice included offerings, sacrifices, and seasonal rituals dedicated to deities associated with agriculture, fertility, and protection. Sacred groves, hilltop altars, and communal gathering places served as focal points for ritual observance. Burial practices included both inhumation and cremation, often accompanied with grave goods such as weapons, ornaments, and pottery, indicating status and lineage. Ritual and communal activities reinforce social cohesion, connecting the rhythms of life, labor, and belief. Technological and military capabilities were central to Samnite society. Stone and bronze tools facilitated agriculture, construction, and craft production. Metallurgy enabled the creation of weapons, armor, and ceremonial objects. The Samnites were particularly noted for their distinctive warrior equipment, including the iconic oblong shields, spears, swords, and protective armor worn by infantry. Military training was integral to daily life, with young men participating in exercises, communal defense, and tribal skirmishes. The combination of terrain, fortification, and martial skill made the Samnites formidable opponents for neighboring powers. Economically, the Samnites combined agriculture, herding, craft production, and trade. Local resources including timber, stone, and metals were exploited for building, tool making, and weaponry. Workshops for pottery, metal tools, and weaponry reflected both subsistence needs and martial culture, integrating craft into everyday routines. The political organization of the Samnites reflected both tribal autonomy and confederation. Individual tribes retained local leadership through councils of elders or elected officials, while collective decisions regarding war, defense, and alliances were made through confederation assemblies. This decentralized yet cooperative system allowed flexibility in response to external threats while maintaining internal cohesion. Fortified hilltop settlements functioned as centers for administration, trade, and ritual, reinforcing social structure and community identity. Artistic expression among the Samnites included pottery, decorative metalwork, sculpture, and architectural design. Pottery vessels were functional and often decorated with geometric motifs or symbolic patterns. Metalwork produced weapons, tools, and jewelry, combining utility and aesthetic qualities. Hilltop sanctuaries and public spaces occasionally displayed carved stone or relief decorations. These artistic forms reinforce social status, ceremonial practice, and cultural identity, reflecting both practical and symbolic aspects of daily life.
The Samnites engaged in repeated conflicts with the expanding Roman Republic, known historically as the Samnite Wars. These wars span nearly a century, demonstrate both military skill and resilience. Samnite strategies relied on knowledge of terrain, flexible formations, and fortifications. Their capacity to mobilize warriors from multiple tribes, combined with disciplined infantry and cavalry, allowed prolonged resistance against Roman expansion. Although eventually subdued, the Samnites influenced Roman military organization, tactics, and culture, leaving a subtle but enduring legacy within the Italian peninsula. Several mysteries surrounding the Samnites endure despite abundant archaeological and textual evidence. The full scope of their political organization, internal alliances, and methods of succession remain partially understood. Details of their religious beliefs and ritual observances are inferred from limited artifacts and burial practices. The precise mechanisms behind their prolonged resistance to Rome, their eventual integration, and the survival of cultural traditions amidst Roman assimilation remain subjects of scholarly investigation. These uncertainties invite reflection on the resilience of tribal societies and the complexity of cultural continuity under external pressures. Walking through the remnants of Samnite settlements evokes terraces of cultivated hillsides, clustered stone houses, defensive walls, and workshops echoing with the rhythm of daily life. Herds graze on sloped pastures, while artisans shape metal and clay in shaded courtyards. Central gathering areas host communal discussions, ritual observances, and market activity. The mountain landscape provides both sustenance and defense, reinforcing the intimate relationship between environment, settlement, and social structure. Rivers and trails connect villages, facilitating trade and communication, weaving the fabric of Samnite society through terrain and time. Samnite urban and rural life reflects the integration of agriculture, pastoralism, craft, military preparation, and ceremonial observance. The balance of survival, social cohesion, and defense illustrates a society capable of adaptation, resilience, and continuity in a challenging environment. Fortifications, burial practices, workshops, and ceremonial spaces reveal an attentiveness to both practical needs and spiritual life. The interplay between mountainous terrain, community organization, and martial skill underscores the sophistication and endurance of a tribal confederation navigating both natural and political challenges. The legacy of the Samnites persists in their influence on Roman military practice, engineering, and social structures.
The Himyarite kingdom emerged in the southwestern highlands of ancient Yemen, forming one of the most influential civilizations of Arabia between roughly the 2nd century BCE and the 6th century CE. Its territory stretched across mountainous ridges, fertile valleys, incense-growing plateaus, and coastal regions reaching toward the Red Sea. Archaeological remains and inscriptions reveal a kingdom built on seasonal agriculture, long-distance trade, fortified cities, and an evolving religious structure that shifted from polytheism to Judaism in its later centuries. The Himyarites developed a complex state that held power through diplomacy, economic control, and strategic alliances, shaping the ancient Arabian world long before the rise of Islamic polities. The landscape of Himyar was central to its identity. High-altitude terraces, stone-lined irrigation channels, monsoon-fed fields, and deep valleys allowed for abundant cultivation compared to the harsher deserts to the north. The capital city of Zafar stood on a volcanic plateau surrounded by defensive stone walls and agricultural estates. Excavations show carefully engineered urban planning, storage rooms, multi-level houses, and administrative buildings. These features indicate a society that adapted to both the rugged terrain and the demands of regional trade. The environment provided natural protection, but also required a disciplined system of water management, with Himyarite farmers building terraced fields that remain recognizable across Yemen today. Daily life in Himyar revolved around farming, herding, craftsmanship, and local commerce. Families cultivated wheat, barley, dates, grapes, and hardy mountain fruits.
Incense trees, particularly frankincense and myrrh, grew in the drier lowlands and supported long-distance trade. Herding of sheep, goats, cattle, and camels complemented agriculture, supplying dairy, wool, hides, and transportation. Himyarite homes were built from basalt stone or baked brick, designed to regulate temperature in both cool highlands and warm valleys. Interiors contained plastered walls, woven mats, ceramic storage jars, and raised sleeping platforms, reflecting the practical needs of highland life. Clothing consisted of woven wool garments, linen robes, leather belts, and embroidered textiles for higher status individuals. Jewelry made from bronze, silver, or gold included rings, pendants, and earrings, often decorated with geometric or floral motifs. Pottery workshops produced cooking vessels, storage jars, incense burners, and amphorae for transporting goods. Craftsmen carved stone with inscriptions, created metal tools, and shaped wooden furniture in chests. Market days brought communities together for trade, social exchange, and the sharing of regional news. The religious life of Himyar evolved over centuries. Early beliefs centered on South Arabian deities linked to rain, fertility, sun, and protection. Temples featured altars, incense burners, and ritual basins, while inscriptions invoked divine guardianship over irrigation systems, fields, and families. Later, the kingdom adopted Judaism as a state religion, a transformation supported by inscriptions, architectural remains, and historical accounts. This shift influenced burial practices, legal customs, and the identity of the ruling elite. Cemeteries contain grave goods, stone markers, and inscriptions outlining lineage and social connections. Ritual purity, community gatherings, and scriptural traditions likely shaped the later forms of Himyarite spiritual life. Technological expertise played a significant role in Himyarite society. Terraced agriculture relied on stone retaining walls, controlled water flow, and erosion management techniques passed down through generations. Stonemasons constructed fortifications, storage facilities, temples, and multi-story houses. Metallurgists produced tools, weapons, and ceremonial items. Potters created standardized containers for incense and agricultural produce. Craftsmen carved stone with inscriptions, created metal tools, and shaped wooden furniture and chests. Market days brought communities together for trade, social exchange, and the sharing of regional news. The religious life of Himyar evolved over centuries. Early beliefs centered on South Arabian deities linked to rain, fertility, sun, and protection. Temples featured altars, incense burners, and ritual basins, while inscriptions invoked divine guardianship over irrigation systems, fields, and families. Later, the kingdom adopted Judaism as a state religion, a transformation supported by inscriptions, architectural remains, and historical accounts. This shift influenced burial practices, legal customs, and the identity of the ruling elite. Cemeteries contain grave goods, stone markers, and inscriptions outlining lineage and social connections. Ritual purity, community gatherings, and scriptural traditions likely shaped the later forms of Himyarite spiritual life. Technological expertise played a significant role in Himyarite society. Terraced agriculture relied on stone retaining walls, controlled water flow, and erosion management techniques passed down through generations. Stonemasons constructed fortifications, storage facilities, temples, and multi-story houses. Metallurgists produced tools, weapons, and ceremonial items. Potters created standardized containers for incense and agricultural produce. Shipbuilders along the Red Sea coast crafted vessels for regional trade, linking Himyar to Africa, India, and Mediterranean markets. Economically, the Himyarites became one of the primary powers controlling the incense trade. Caravans transported frankincense, myrrh, spices, aromatics, and textiles northward through the Arabian Peninsula toward Palestine, Egypt, and the Mediterranean. In return, Himyarite received luxury goods, metalwork, wine, and imported ceramics. Agricultural surplus supported both local populations and merchant enterprises. Markets in urban and rural areas facilitated exchange of livestock, grain, pottery, fabrics, and tools. Ports connected the kingdom with African civilizations such as Aksum and with maritime routes extending to India. political structure centered on kings who ruled from Zafar or other strongholds, supported by councils, military commanders, scribes, and provincial administrators. Inscriptions carved onto stone blocks or metal plaques document laws, treaties, public works, and royal decrees. Territorial expansion allowed the Himyarites to absorb rival South Arabian kingdoms such as Saba and Hadramaut, forming a unified political entity. Fortified cities and watchtowers reflected the need to monitor trade routes and defend mountainous terrain. As a major power in Arabia, Himyar interacted with the Roman Empire, Sasanian Persia, Aksum in Ethiopia, and local tribes, balancing diplomacy with military strength. The Himyarite military relied on infantry, cavalry, fortified hilltop positions, and control of mountain passes. Warriors equipped with spears, swords, shields, and protective armor defended trade routes and settlements. Siege technologies, defensive walls, and strategic alliances strengthened the kingdom's position. Mountain terrain provided natural advantages, enabling resistance against invaders and maintaining borders across rugged highlands. Despite extensive evidence, several mysteries surround the Himyarite kingdom. The precise origins of early Himyarite rule remain uncertain, with gaps in royal lineages and administrative organization. Details of the transition to Judaism and its social impact are still debated, as sources are fragmentary. The connection between Himyar and neighboring Aksum raises questions about diplomacy, trade rivalry, and military conflict. The collapse of the kingdom during the 6th century CE remains only partially understood, with environmental changes, internal disputes, and external invasions all proposed as contributing factors. Zafar's partial destruction and abandonment before the rise of Islam adds further uncertainty to the historical narrative. Archaeological gaps include missing royal tombs, incomplete palace structures.
The Amaran pearl divers of the Shale Coast developed their culture around a coastline where the ocean floor dipped sharply into a canyon lined with rare bioluminescent mollusks. These mollusks produced a soft, steady glow used by the community for navigation, ornamentation, and ceremonial markings. The Amaran people created a diving tradition that reached back thousands of years, relying on controlled breathing, weighted belts carved from shale blocks, and woven kelp rope systems that allowed divers to descend and ascend safely. Their coastal settlements grew around natural shelves where cliffs offered protection from storms, and their houses were constructed from smooth shale bricks sealed with resin from coastal shrubs. Every building faced the sea to observe tide shifts that informed the community's survival. Pearl diving in this region required an understanding of undercurrents flowing through the canyon. The Amaran charted these movements using carved stone plates depicting the seasonal direction and strength of the currents. Young divers trained by practicing in shallow coves, learning how to regulate their breath to last several minutes underwater. This tradition strengthened their lungs and gave them a reputation for extraordinary endurance. The glowing mollusks they collected were kept in wet storage stone vaults that preserved their light for months. These vaults were lined with mineral-rich clay that maintained humidity and temperature to keep the mollusks alive even during harsh winters. The Amaran developed a trade system exporting bioluminescent pigments created by grinding the shells of deceased mollusks. The pigment adhered to clay, leather, wood, and early textile materials. Their traders traveled inland, exchanging pigments for grains, medicinal roots, and polished stones. Inland cultures regarded the glowing markings as signs of authority, and some used them in funerary rites, believing the glowing lines guided spirits through darkness. This demand encouraged the Amaran to refine harvesting methods that minimized the destruction of living colonies, helping maintain ecological balance. Domestic life among the Amaran included dietary systems based on shellfish, ocean greens, and dried fish strips that could withstand long winters. They preserved food through salt curing and smoke drying, using shell chambers built into cliff sides where airflow remained constant. These chambers doubled as storage and safety shelters during seasonal storms. Families operated in clustered units, sharing tools, boats, and drying racks. Children learned ocean reading skills early, including wave pattern interpretation and wind behavior. Their craftsmanship extended to boat making. Amaran boats used flexible driftwood frames wrapped in layered seal skins. The skins created buoyancy and resistance to waterlogging. The curved bow design reduced pressure when entering heavy surf. These boats enabled long-distance travel along the shale coast and occasional expeditions across deep-water channels to gather new wild colonies of bioluminescent mollusks. Amaran navigators used star maps scratched into thin shale plates carried in leather rolls. These maps included tide markers and seasonal constellations. Rituals formed a significant part of their cultural identity. The tide return ceremony honored divers who completed difficult expeditions. Participants painted their arms with glowing lines using fresh pigment and stood near the shoreline during the silent part of the tide's return. The belief held that the ocean recognized endurance and offered protection to those who respected its cycles. Priests of the Amaran wore garments decorated with pearl strands, symbolizing their connection to the sea. Their chants relied on low rhythmic patterns mimicking the sound of waves against shale cliffs. Archaeological traces of Amaran settlements show that they constructed tiered walkways on cliffs using stone pegs hammered into natural cracks. These walkways linked households and diving points, ensuring safe travel during high tide. Excavated pottery reveals wave and spiral motifs. Some pots contain residue of mollusk pigment mixed with oil, suggesting portable lamps used for night work. Neatly arranged toolkits found in ruined structures contain blade stones, shell scrapers, and braided kelp cords. The organized layout of these items implies a disciplined, skilled-based society. The Amaran recorded their knowledge through symbolic etchings. Their carvings combine linear patterns representing currents, dots for airflow pockets, and spirals marking deep water areas dangerous for novice divers. Some etchings were found in underwater caves, indicating divers left messages for others who explored the same routes. These markings are among the earliest underwater communication systems known in the region. Clothing styles adapted to a windy, salt-heavy environment. Daily garments consisted of layered seaweed fiber cloth reinforced with fish skin patches. During winter, residents wore heavier cloaks made from fur seals hunted in regulated seasons. Jewelry focused on simple designs using polished shell discs and small pearls gathered from mollusk clusters without harming them. Shell bracelets served as status indicators, with experienced divers receiving larger shells. Seasons shaped the Amaran calendar. The cold surge months forced a halt in deep diving as currents grew unpredictable. These months were dedicated to restoring tools, repairing boats, training youth, and conducting clan gatherings. During the warm shift, diving intensified and trade routes reopened. Records etched into shell tablets document weather patterns, identifying storm cycles that match modern climate data from that coastline. The community observed a recurring 32-year storm pattern, adjusting settlement placement to avoid known flood zones. The Amaran culinary traditions included glowing mollusk broth believed to aid night vision. The broth glowed faintly due to remaining bioluminescent proteins. Although the glow faded quickly, the broth's cultural significance endured. Feasts included long tables carved from driftwood where families brought preserved fish, sea greens, and fermented root drinks. These gatherings reinforced social cohesion before diving seasons. Technological development progressed steadily. Weighted belts transitioned from simple shale blocks to hollow bronze-filled structures after the community learned smelting from inland traders. Rope quality improved with a braid technique integrating kelp and animal sinew, granting greater resilience. Divers' masks evolved from simple eye shields made of fishbone frames to resin-coated transparent plates. This improvement allowed clearer vision in deep waters. Environmental understanding was sophisticated. The Amaran mapped the canyon's mollusk colonies, noting growth cycles, resting seasons, and dangerous zones inhabited by predatory eels. They practiced rotational harvesting, leaving sections untouched for years. Their ecological respect preserved the canyon's biodiversity, allowing sustainable supply throughout centuries.
Writer inscriptions mention fears of overharvesting, indicating awareness of potential imbalance. The decline of the Amaran likely resulted from major tectonic shifts that destabilized the shale cliffs. Evidence of sudden landslides suggests entire settlements fell into the sea. Some stone vaults remain intact underwater, glowing faintly due to surviving mollusk colonies. Divers exploring these spots centuries later documented unusual patterns of shell accumulation, hinting at abandoned storage chambers. Climatic reconstruction indicates that colder waters migrated into the region, diminishing mollusk reproduction. Trade diminished and inland routes collapsed.
The Carthun obsidian glass weavers developed across a volcanic plateau where eruptions layered the landscape with dark basalt, shimmering volcanic glass, and rivers of cooled obsidian. This environment shaped every aspect of their civilization. Their settlements stood near fault lines that produced regular geothermal vents, providing warmth during cold seasons. The Carthun learned to manipulate volcanic materials with precision, becoming masters of obsidian crafting and glass shaping long before neighboring societies understood high-temperature control. Their workshops used natural lava tubes as insulated chambers where heat remained stable for long hours, allowing artisans to perfect detailed work. The obsidian weavers created blade tools, polished mirrors, and ceremonial prisms using a refinement technique that involved heating raw shards in volcanic sand and cooling them slowly in mineral-rich water. This process reduced brittleness and increased clarity. Their mirrors served not only practical grooming purposes, but also scientific ones. Astronomers used reflective surfaces to track light movements across the sky, documenting stars, seasonal constellations, and comet paths on slate tablets. These observations guided agricultural cycles, migration routes, and predictions of volcanic activity. Carthun architecture featured thick basalt walls bonded with volcanic ash mortar. Homes were circular to disperse seismic pressure and minimize collapse during tremors. Roofs consisted of interlaced wooden beams covered with heat-treated clay tiles. Central courtyards contained stone cisterns that collected rainwater through carved gutter channels. These cisterns were essential as the volcanic plateau lacked natural rivers. Water scarcity pushed the community to design elaborate condensation nets made from woven glass fibers that captured moisture from night air and funneled it into storage pits lined with obsidian dust. The economy relied on glass production. Traders traveled across desert regions carrying obsidian blades wrapped in thick hide. These blades were valued for their sharpness, often used in surgical procedures by neighboring cultures. Alongside blades, Carthun merchants offered small glass beads that refracted sunlight into spectral colors. These beads decorated garments, masks, and ceremonial banners. Merchants traveled in large caravans protected by guards trained in obsidian spear combat. Roads between settlements were marked by tall basalt pillars engraved with directional spirals and warnings of unstable ground. Daily life in the Carthun Plateau revolved around geothermal cycles. Families cooked meals on heated stones placed above steam vents. Clay pots simmered slowly throughout the day, producing broths flavored with volcanic herbs and root vegetables grown in enriched soil near lava fields. Agriculture prospered in these pockets of fertility because ash deposits added minerals that enhanced plant growth. Farmers used obsidian plows with weighted handles to break compact soil. They cultivated tubers, red grains, and dark leaf herbs resistant to ash coating. Clothing incorporated woven fibers strengthened with fine volcanic sand. The sand stiffened the fabric, providing heat resistance useful when working near lava tubes. Artisans wore face coverings of polished bone and glass lenses to protect their eyes from bright reflections. Festive clothing displayed bands of glass beads arranged in geometric patterns representing fault lines and lava flows. These designs symbolized respect for the Earth's powerful movements and their belief that the land shaped destiny. Spiritual life centered around the Tremor Sanctum, a massive stone chamber built within a dormant crater.
The sanctum held tall, narrow windows aligned with sunrise during equinoxes. At these moments, sunlight struck suspended glass discs hanging from the ceiling, scattering beams of light across the chamber walls. Priests interpreted these shifting lights as messages from the Earth's core. Rituals involved deep humming to mimic seismic vibrations. Participants stood barefoot on carved stone rings that resonated with sound, creating a unified vibration believed to communicate stability to the land. Carthun record keepers maintained extensive archives of volcanic behavior. They documented tremors, minor eruptions, ash fallout patterns, and changes in steam vent pressure. These records remain valuable to modern geologists because the symbols represent consistent observations across centuries. Tablets made from fired clay, obsidian shards, and etched basalt slabs contain some of the earliest predictive models of volcanic cycles. The community understood that larger eruptions often followed long quiet periods, prompting them to periodically relocate settlements to safer zones. Glass weaving techniques defined their technological advancements. Unlike traditional glass blowing, the Carthun method required heating obsidian until it reached a semi-fluid state, then pulling thin strands using metal hooks cooled in snow brought from distant mountains. These strands formed the basis of woven glass sheets used for windows, lantern covers, and ritual capes. The capes shimmered with iridescent reflections that appeared to move with the wearer. Some remained intact in archaeological contexts, preserved within collapsed underground chambers. Weapons represented a combination of artistry and engineering. Spears featured multi-layered obsidian edges fused with resin and heated sand. Shields displayed circular glass centers that reflected sunlight intensely, disorienting attackers on bright days. Warriors trained near lava fields to improve heat endurance and practiced combat among basalt boulders to refine movement in uneven terrain. Their battle strategy emphasized striking swiftly with razor-edged blades before retreating to higher volcanic ground. Education followed a structured system. Children began with studies of stone behavior, learning how fractures formed and how pressure changed rock shapes. Practical lessons included carrying heated obsidian using insulated tools and mixing ash-based mortar for construction. Adolescents apprenticed with artisans or record keepers. Talented students joined astronomers who observed celestial reflections on polished obsidian surfaces. These astronomers mapped cycles of brightness and used them to estimate time during overcast periods when sun visibility was limited. Food culture reflected their environment. Meals featured root stews cooked for hours, smoked meats placed inside geothermal vents, and baked seed cakes heated on black stones. Fermented drinks brewed in obsidian-lined jars acquired distinct flavors from trace minerals absorbed through the glass. Families gathered each evening around steam pits that doubled as natural heaters. Nighttime conversations often centered on recent tremors, predictions, and preparation measures, emphasizing their collective vigilance. Environmental challenges shaped their resilience. Ash storms forced residents to take shelter inside sealed chambers constructed with tightly fitted basalt blocks. To maintain air quality, engineers built filtration vents filled with layered moss and sand. Heavy tremors triggered controlled evacuations toward open plains where falling debris posed less danger. Inscriptions describe coordinated drills held each season to maintain readiness. These preparations allowed the civilization to endure numerous eruptions with minimal loss. Social organization divided society into three main groups: artisans, record keepers, and earth callers. Artisans produced daily tools and ceremonial objects. Record keepers maintained scientific and historical archives. Earth callers interpreted land signals and advised leaders on settlement placement. Leadership rotated among respected elders chosen for stability in judgment rather than wealth. Meetings occurred in circular basalt chambers with acoustics designed to amplify quiet voices, promoting calm decision-making. Decline occurred after a series of high-magnitude eruptions destabilized the plateau. Entire lava tubes collapsed, burying workshops and glass archives. Ash fields thickened, reducing agricultural capacity. Surviving groups migrated to neighboring regions carrying small bags of polished obsidian beads. Some integrated into existing societies.
The Selukar Dune archivists lived across an expanse of shifting desert where towering sand waves moved like slow, silent tides. Their homeland stretched between crescent-shaped dunes that rose and collapsed with the seasons, leaving behind layers of wind-written patterns. This civilization emerged in a region where the desert behaved almost like a living ocean. Sandstorms carved gullies, night winds sculpted ridges, and rare monsoon bursts created momentary lakes that disappeared within days. The Selukar adapted to this constant transformation by developing a culture deeply rooted in observation, record-keeping, and subtle desert engineering. Archaeological traces indicate their presence from approximately 1200 BCE to 350 CE. Their earliest settlements formed around deep natural basins where ancient groundwater surfaced at intervals, providing temporary but reliable oases. Excavations revealed circular foundations built from compacted sand mixed with sap from desert shrubs, creating a hard, stone-like material. These structures resisted erosion surprisingly well, allowing modern researchers to trace settlement patterns across multiple dune fields. The discovery of Selukar sites began in the early 20th century, when explorers noticed repeating geometric depressions aligned with dune crests. Later surveys confirmed these were remnants of planned habitation complexes arranged to minimize sand accumulation. One of the earliest recorded Selukar artifacts was a set of clay tablets found in a dried basin. The tablets were inscribed with symbols resembling wind paths and dune orientations, suggesting the Selukar mapped desert movement over centuries. This was unusual, as few ancient desert societies recorded environmental data so consistently. Subsequent findings included long, narrow chambers carved beneath dunes, reinforced with palm wood beams. These chambers preserved hundreds of etched stone slivers arranged like pages of a library. Scholars now believe the Selukars stored their knowledge in these underground archives, safe from the winds that erased everything above ground. Daily life for the Selukar revolved around desert rhythms. Their dwellings were low structures with domed roofs made from woven reeds covered in insulating sand plaster. Each dome included ventilation shafts designed to catch cooler night winds and distribute them through the interior. The people wore layered garments dyed in pale, sun-reflective colors, primarily whites, tans, and muted yellows. These garments were made from woven desert grasses blended with wool from hardy sheep herded in rocky foothills. Their footwear consisted of broad leather soles that distributed weight evenly, preventing deep sinking into soft dunes. Food came from a combination of herding, seasonal agriculture, and desert foraging. The Selukar cultivated lentils, millet, and hardy vegetables in sunken garden pits called dew farms. These pits captured moisture from night air, allowing plants to thrive with minimal irrigation. They also harvested a desert fruit that grew on low, sprawling shrubs, producing a sweet pulp rich in minerals. During rare monsoon seasons, the people gathered water into deep, stone-lined reservoirs. Fish occasionally appeared in temporary lakes formed by floods, and these became an important protein source during wet years. Rituals focused on memory, cycles, and the movement of the dunes. The Selukar believed each dune held a long history, written in its buried layers. Their priests, known as archive readers, studied dune cross-sections after major storms, interpreting the patterns like the pages of a book. Large communal gatherings took place beneath shaded canopies where archive readers recited tales drawn from these sand layers. These tales described ancient storms, lost caravans, and long-gone oases. Rock carvings found in sheltered cliffs portray robed figures tracing shapes in the sand, representing their belief that the desert's shifting lines were messages from earlier generations. burial traditions reflected their reverence for the dunes. Rather than constructing tombs, families buried their dead at the edge of moving sand ridges, choosing locations where the dunes would slowly cover the bodies. This practice symbolized the return of memory to the desert. Grave goods included carved tokens depicting wind symbols, fragments of woven cloth, and small jars containing scented desert resin. Archaeologists occasionally find intact Selukar skeletons beneath stabilized dunes, preserved by the dryness of the environment. Technological accomplishments centered on controlling and understanding sand. The Selukar developed methods for reinforcing dunes using stakes woven with plant fiber. These stakes guided wind flow, preventing dunes from overtaking settlements. They also constructed long windbreaks made from aligned reed bundles anchored with stone weights. These structures redirected sandstorms, reducing damage. Their water capture systems included funnel structures made of clay-coated woven mats that condensed moisture from cool night breezes into drip channels. Evidence suggests they experimented with early forms of solar distillation using glass-like minerals fused by lightning strikes. Economically, the Selukar played a crucial role in long-distance trade. Their settlements lay along early caravan routes that moved spices, textiles, and minerals across the desert. They traded painted ceramic vessels, salt blocks extracted from dry lake beds, medicinal resins, and knowledge of safe desert crossings. Caravan leaders depended on Selukar guides who memorized dune movements and wind patterns. These guides could predict sandstorm timing with impressive accuracy by reading the shape of morning shadows on dune slopes. The Selukar also produced intricate maps carved onto thin stone sheets. These maps did not depict fixed paths, but instead used patterns of suction dips, wind vanes, and dune orientations to describe routes. Modern researchers struggle to decode them fully, as they represent constantly shifting landscapes. Some scholars suggest these maps were updated regularly, making them among the earliest dynamic cartographic systems in human history. Mysteries surrounding the Selukar continue to intrigue researchers. One of the most debated questions involves the disappearance of several major archive chambers. Early explorers documented their entrances, but when archaeologists returned decades later, the chambers had vanished beneath dunes with no trace. This suggests the Selukar may have designed some archives to collapse intentionally after long periods of abandonment, or the dune movement simply consumed them entirely. Without excavation in unstable dunes, their contents may remain lost forever. Another mystery involves ornate crystal cylinders found in several excavation sites. These cylinders, carved from naturally occurring desert quartz, contain swirling internal patterns. Some believe they served as optical tools for reading dune patterns under bright sun, while others propose ceremonial functions. Their true purpose remains elusive. The language of the Selukar is another unresolved puzzle. Only fragments of their script survive, mostly related to environmental records. Attempts to decipher it have been difficult due to limited bilingual references. The symbols resemble flowing strokes, mimicking wind trails, and may encode both sound and movement concepts simultaneously. Some linguists believe the script was used primarily for scientific and ritual documentation rather than for everyday communication. Climate records within the region hint at prolonged drying around 350 CE, which may have contributed to their disappearance. As groundwater retreated and dunes became increasingly unstable, the Selukar may have migrated toward more fertile regions. Genetic studies of nearby later populations show traces that could align with Selukar ancestry, though this remains speculative. No direct evidence of conflict or catastrophic collapse has been found, supporting the theory of gradual relocation. Another unresolved structure is a massive semicircular embankment discovered beneath a stabilized dune. The embankment features stone channels that align with seasonal wind patterns. Some propose it was a vast sand control mechanism. Others believe it served as a ceremonial amphitheater where sound carried unusually well. Acoustics tests inside reconstructed sections reveal a natural amplification effect that would have allowed a speaker to be heard clearly over large distances. The legacy of the Selukar Dune archivists lies in their profound understanding of desert movement and their ability to adapt to a landscape defined by impermanence. Their settlements, windbreaks, archives, and symbolic records demonstrate deep respect for natural cycles. Rather than resisting their environment, they embraced its fluidity and developed knowledge systems rooted in patient observation. Their civilization represents a unique dialogue between humanity and shifting sands, preserving memory in a world where everything changes.
The Selukar Dune archivists lived across an expanse of shifting desert where towering sand waves moved like slow, silent tides. Their homeland stretched between crescent-shaped dunes that rose and collapsed with the seasons, leaving behind layers of wind-written patterns. This civilization emerged in a region where the desert behaved almost like a living ocean. Sandstorms carved gullies, night winds sculpted ridges, and rare monsoon bursts created momentary lakes that disappeared within days. The Selukar adapted to this constant transformation by developing a culture deeply rooted in observation, record-keeping, and subtle desert engineering. Archaeological traces indicate their presence from approximately 1200 BCE to 350 CE. Their earliest settlements formed around deep natural basins where ancient groundwater surfaced at intervals, providing temporary but reliable oases. Excavations revealed circular foundations built from compacted sand mixed with sap from desert shrubs, creating a hard, stone-like material. These structures resisted erosion surprisingly well, allowing modern researchers to trace settlement patterns across multiple dune fields. The discovery of Selukar sites began in the early 20th century when explorers noticed repeating geometric depressions aligned with dune crests. Later surveys confirmed these were remnants of planned habitation complexes arranged to minimize sand accumulation. One of the earliest recorded Selukar artifacts was a set of clay tablets found in a dried basin. The tablets were inscribed with symbols resembling wind paths and dune orientations, suggesting the Selukar mapped desert movement over centuries. This was unusual, as few ancient desert societies recorded environmental data so consistently. Subsequent findings included long, narrow chambers carved beneath dunes, reinforced with palm wood beams. These chambers preserved hundreds of etched stone slivers arranged like pages of a library. Scholars now believe the Selukar stored their knowledge in these underground archives, safe from the winds that erased everything above ground. Daily life for the Selukar revolved around desert rhythms. Their dwellings were low structures with domed roofs made from woven reeds covered in insulating sandplaster. Each dome included ventilation shafts designed to catch cooler night winds and distribute them through the interior. The people wore layered garments dyed in pale, sun-reflective colors, primarily whites, tans, and muted yellows. These garments were made from woven desert grasses blended with wool from hardy sheep herded in rocky foothills. Their footwear consisted of broad leather soles that distributed weight evenly, preventing deep sinking into soft dunes. Food came from a combination of herding, seasonal agriculture, and desert foraging. The Selukar cultivated lentils, millet, and hardy vegetables in sunken garden pits called dew farms. These pits captured moisture from night air, allowing plants to thrive with minimal irrigation. They also harvested a desert fruit that grew on low, sprouting shrubs, producing a sweet pulp rich in minerals. During rare monsoon seasons, the people gathered water into deep, stone-lined reservoirs. Fish occasionally appeared in temporary lakes formed by floods, and these became an important protein source during wet years. Rituals focused on memory, cycles, and the movement of the dunes. The Selukar believed each dune held a long history written in its buried layers. Their priests, known as archive readers, studied dune cross-sections after major storms, interpreting the patterns like the pages of a book. Large communal gatherings took place beneath shaded canopies where archive readers recited tales drawn from these sand layers. These tales described ancient storms, lost caravans, and long-gone oases. Rock carvings found in sheltered cliffs portray robed figures tracing shapes in the sand, representing their belief that the desert's shifting lines were messages from earlier generations. Burial traditions reflected their reverence for the dunes. Rather than constructing tombs, families buried their dead at the edge of moving sand ridges, choosing locations where the dunes would slowly cover the bodies. This practice symbolized the return of memory to the desert. Grave goods included carved tokens depicting wind symbols, fragments of woven cloth, and small jars containing scented desert resin. Archaeologists occasionally find intact Selukar skeletons beneath stabilized dunes, preserved by the dryness of the environment. Another unresolved structure is a massive semicircular embankment discovered beneath a stabilized dune. The embankment features stone channels that align with seasonal rend patterns. Some propose it was a vast sand control mechanism. Others believe it served as a ceremonial amphitheater where sound carried unusually well. Acoustics tests inside reconstructed sections reveal a natural amplification effect that would allow a speaker to be heard clearly over large distances. The legacy of the Selukar Dune archivists lies in their profound understanding of desert movement and their ability to adapt to a landscape defined by impermanence. Their settlements, windbreaks, archives, and symbolic records demonstrate deep respect for natural cycles. Rather than resisting their environment, they embraced its fluidity and developed knowledge systems rooted in patient observation. Their civilization represents a unique dialogue between humanity and shifting sands, preserving memory in a world where everything changes.
The 15th civilization in this long chain of forgotten societies is one whose traces are found mostly beneath collapsed limestone chambers and wind-swept sinkholes. The Valari Basin circles existed in an environment shaped by subterranean rivers, where ancient inhabitants carved their settlements directly into soft rock and extended their structures downward instead of outward. The remaining cavities show a pattern of circular chambers radiating in spirals, each linked by narrow descending corridors. These spirals have been compared to both astronomical diagrams and water flow models, suggesting that the Valari people might have developed a hybrid worldview connecting hydrology with celestial cycles. Inside the deeper sections of these cores, limestone walls still carry faint grooves, believed to have held wooden rib frames once used to support ceiling coverings. Some early researchers assumed the circles were burial structures, but modern studies suggest they functioned as both communal meeting spaces and water monitoring stations. The Valari understood that the underground rivers changed seasonally, and these spirals allowed them to listen to faint vibrations in the stone. Displacement of water produced low-frequency humming, and the layout of the circles amplified the sound. This environmental awareness made them extremely skilled at predicting seasonal changes long before written calendars. Inside the deeper sections of these cores, limestone walls still carry faint grooves, believed to have held wooden rib frames once used to support ceiling coverings. Some early researchers assumed the circles were burial structures, but modern studies suggest they functioned as both communal meeting spaces and water monitoring stations. The Valari understood that the underground rivers changed seasonally, and these spirals allowed them to listen to faint vibrations in the stone. Displacement of water produced low-frequency humming, and the layout of the circles amplified the sound. This environmental awareness made them extremely skilled at predicting seasonal changes long before written calendars. The Valari Basin circles also contain remnants of tools made from a composite mixture of bone powder, crushed shell, and a hardened organic resin. This mixture has not been fully replicated, and its ability to resist moisture surprises researchers. Tools crafted from it were used to carve stone and direct drip water into channels. These channels ran along the circular floors, forming a ring-shaped network that distributed underground water evenly through the settlement. The Valari kept water extremely clean, possibly using naturally occurring antibacterial minerals from nearby caves. Chemical testing on limestone deposits shows unusual low bacterial residue, suggesting a deliberate method of preservation. Climate studies show that the region experienced periodic drought cycles lasting up to 12 years. During these periods, many civilizations in nearby surface regions collapsed, but the Valari basin circles endured. Their subterranean design kept temperature stable, preserving food inside stone alcoves. The people used a fermentation system involving cave fungi, which allowed storage of grains and roots. Very few civilizations of similar age developed such advanced biological food preservation systems, highlighting the Valari's practical creativity. The artistic elements of the Valari people are subtle, carved into otherwise plain stone. Many symbols repeat: concentric circles, branching rivers, and a unique three-pronged shape believed to represent their understanding of the world: surface, cavern, and deep water unknown. The repetition of these symbols suggests a worldview where human life was positioned between two vast realms, one above and one below. Some chambers contain carved reliefs of fish and amphibians not native to the region, implying that they heard stories about faraway ecosystems through trade or migration encounters. One of the most fascinating aspects of this civilization is their acoustic engineering. The spiral chambers have natural resonance points. When a soft sound was made at the center of the circle, it would travel outward and upward, producing a slow pulsation effect. Experiments performed by archaeologists show that whispering inside certain central nodes creates harmonic overtones. This means the Valari intentionally built chambers that interacted with sound waves. Their rituals may not have been focused on loud chanting, but instead used quiet, rhythmic tones that amplified through the spirals. This sound design suggests a meditation-based culture rather than a dramatic ceremonial one. Trade artifacts found in the upper chambers show that the Valari were not isolated. Beads made from river pearls, fragments of obsidian, and pieces of woven reed mats have been found. These objects came from distant regions, indicating a trade network that passed through the basin. However, the Valari never built large external monuments or above-ground cities. Their settlements remained hidden, blending with the landscape. This may be why the civilization survived so long without drawing conflict from expanding kingdoms. Evidence shows that the Valari had a council-based form of leadership. The deepest chamber in each settlement contains a circular seat arrangement carved directly into the stone. The seats are uniform in size, which implies that leadership was not based on a single ruler but shared among equal representatives. The Valari might have valued collective decision-making, especially in matters related to water management. This council structure suggests a socially balanced community without extreme hierarchies. Over generations, sediment buildup and collapses buried many chambers. The civilization gradually declined due to long-term geological instability. Sinkholes widened and underground rivers shifted their paths, destroying key corridors. As the water flow changed, food storage areas became too damp, leading to mold and structural decay. Without continuous maintenance, the system became hazardous, forcing people to migrate outward. Their knowledge of hydrology unfortunately couldn't prevent the larger geological forces that reshaped the land. No records show where these people went after leaving the basin. Some researchers believe they joined neighboring hill communities, contributing their understanding of water systems. Others think the Valari dispersed and vanished as separate families, losing their identity over time. A few scholars argue that the minimal symbolism and avoidance of external monuments indicate a cultural preference for impermanence, meaning the decline may have been accepted as part of their worldview. The legacy of the Valari Basin circles remains in their architecture, which blends environmental adaptation, sound engineering, and hydrological awareness. Their ability to turn caves into functional, comfortable living spaces reveals deep knowledge of natural systems. The civilization stands as a reminder that some societies developed complexity not through towering structures or vast armies, but by listening to the earth itself.
Their quiet existence, preserved through carefully carved stone, speaks of a culture deeply intertwined with the environment, prioritizing survival through subtle innovation instead of visible dominance. The collapse of the Valari Basin circles was not a dramatic event, but a slow erosion of structural stability. Stone roofs thinned, corridors narrowed due to mineral buildup, and underground water shifted unpredictably. Over centuries, the inhabitants gradually retreated, leaving
The 16th civilization, known in archaeological notes as the Kasharan Red Steppe Builders, emerged on a plateau marked by iron-rich soil that produced a distinct reddish hue. Their settlement stretched across a broad steppe where strong winds shaped the land into rolling waves of sediment. The Kasharan community developed an architectural style that adapted to this environment, using layered clay blocks reinforced with plant fibers. These blocks hardened under direct sunlight, creating durable structures capable of withstanding shifting wind patterns. Many surviving remains show rectangular homes built in long aligned rows, forming narrow corridors that acted as wind channels. These channels reduced pressure against the buildings, preventing collapse during seasonal storms. In the center of each Kasharan settlement stood a rectangular plaza lined with upright stone pillars. These pillars, carved from soft local rock, held shallow grooves that experts believe once supported wooden beams, forming lightweight roofs. Beneath these roofs, community members held seasonal gatherings, trade exchanges, and decision-making assemblies. Fragments of painted pottery found at these sites show geometric shapes resembling wind swirls, steppe grasses, and abstract animal forms. The pottery indicates an artistic preference for symmetry and repetitive patterns, likely reflecting their attempts to impose order over a landscape shaped by constant natural movement. Agriculture in the Red Steppe region required careful water management. The Kasharans developed a channeling system composed of shallow trenches arranged in long parallel lines. These trenches guided rainfall runoff across fields, allowing water to soak slowly into soil instead of evaporating quickly. Remnants of dried trenches show a consistent width and depth, suggesting standardized construction methods. Seeds preserved in clay vessels point to crops such as hardy millet, drought-resistant legumes, and a type of small-grain barley. These crops survived in low-moisture environments and provided stable food supplies during long, dry seasons. Near the borders of their settlements, the Kasharan placed clusters of flat stones arranged in circular patterns. These patterns appear repeatedly across the region and likely served as markers for grazing zones or areas where nomadic herders could exchange goods with settled communities. Evidence of animal husbandry includes bone remains of cattle, goats, and a unique breed of steppe-adapted sheep with thick, wind-resistant wool. Tools used for shearing made from polished bone have been discovered in several excavation layers. Social structure in Kasharan society appears to have revolved around collective responsibility. Excavations uncover few signs of hierarchical wealth differences, as homes and burial sites show similar sizes and contents. Graves typically contain woven cloth, simple pottery, and small personal objects, such as carved bone pendants. These pendants often depict a central line branching into two curved extensions, interpreted by researchers as the symbol of the Red Steppe winds. The uniformity across burial sites suggests a cultural view that valued community stability and respected individuals equally regardless of status. The Kasharan language remains unknown, but markings found on clay tablets and wooden fragments show a repeating set of symbols. These symbols may represent a proto-writing system used for inventory, trade records, or seasonal observations. The presence of tally marks near agricultural terraces suggests that the people may have recorded planting cycles or rainfall estimations. Some symbols appear near stone pillars in central plazas, indicating public information displays or ritual markings. Although researchers have not cracked the meaning of these symbols, their consistent appearance across multiple sites confirms a shared communication system. One of the most notable characteristics of the Kasharan civilization is their wind-based measurement technology. Certain stone pillars contain elongated holes drilled through their upper halves. When strong winds passed through these holes, the resulting tones varied in pitch. By listening to these tones, members of the community could determine wind direction and intensity. This natural instrument-like function allowed them to predict approaching storms, prepare storage facilities, and adjust agricultural plans. These pillars demonstrate an early form of environmental forecasting embedded directly into architecture. Trade was an essential part of Kasharan life. Excavations reveal beads made from turquoise, shells from distant river regions, and obsidian originating from volcanic areas far beyond the steppe. These objects indicate long-distance exchange routes that may have connected the Kasharans to both nomadic traders and established river kingdoms. Tools found at some Kasharan sites include blades made from a composite material combining stone flakes and plant resin. This technique produced flexible yet durable cutting tools suitable for harvesting grass, processing hides, and shaping clay. Religious or ceremonial life in the Kasharan culture appears closely tied to wind and movement. Many artifacts contain swirling patterns, spirals, and wave-like lines. Some symbols feature 3 repeating arcs, possibly representing the 3 major seasonal wind cycles identified in the region's climate history. Stone reliefs found near several sites depict elongated animal shapes with exaggerated legs, interpreted by archaeologists as representations of migrating herds. These images suggest that the Kasharan believed natural forces and animals played central roles in sustaining life on the steppe. Their clothing, reconstructed from textile impressions and preserved fragments, reveal a practical adaptation to the climate. They wove long, wind-resistant cloaks from sheep wool. These cloaks draped over the shoulders and extended to the knees, acting as both garment and portable shelter. Decorative elements included simple stripes dyed using minerals mixed with plant extracts. The dyes produced muted red, brown, and gray tones that matched the steppe landscape, blending clothing with the natural environment. Despite their environmental mastery, the Kasharan civilization eventually faced a gradual decline. Paleoclimate studies reveal a century-long shift that brought stronger winds, colder winters, and reduced seasonal rainfall. These conditions made agriculture increasingly difficult, forcing the people to adjust their settlement patterns. Some Kasharan groups began relocating closer to riverbanks at the edges of the steppe, while others merged with nomadic herding communities. Over time, the distinct architectural style and symbolic system of the Kasharan faded into new cultural blends. Excavation layers show abandoned homes filled with wind-carried sediment. Clay blocks, once hardened by sunlight, began to crack and crumble due to colder temperatures. Trenches for water distribution filled with sand, and central plazas lost their wooden roof structures to storms. While no catastrophic event marks their disappearance, the evidence points to a slow environmental pressure that pushed them toward migration and cultural integration. One surprising discovery from Kasharan sites is the presence of large, flat stone platforms located on elevated ridges. These platforms provide wide views of the surrounding steppe, and researchers believe they served as observation points for monitoring herds, trade caravans, or approaching weather. Some platforms contain carved depressions arranged in straight lines, possibly used to align shadows for tracking the sun's position. This suggests that the Kasharan developed early solar observation practices that helped regulate agricultural timing and community planning. In the last phases of their history, signs of resource sharing and cooperation increased. Communal granaries expanded, and small satellite cells.
The 17th civilization, known in archaeological literature as the Zemar Dune Harbor people, occupied a shifting coastal desert where pale sand met shallow tidal inlets. Their settlements formed along a corridor of crescent-shaped dunes that changed position with seasonal winds. Early excavations show that the Zemar constructed their homes from compacted sand blocks mixed with crushed shell fragments. These blocks, when dampened with brine water and left to dry under the intense desert sun, hardened into firm structures capable of withstanding both dune movement and coastal humidity. Many remaining foundations appear slightly tilted, a result of the slow, natural migration of the sand beneath them. Yet the consistent layout of rooms and courtyards suggests the Zemar intentionally designed their architecture to remain functional even as the land shifted beneath their feet. The core of Zemar settlements centered around natural lagoons formed where tidal water pooled between dune ridges. Artifacts found along these lagoon edges, nets made from twisted desert flax, bone hooks, and wicker traps indicate that fishing played a major role in the community's daily life. The inlets hosted populations of small silver fish, crustaceans, and mollusks that thrived in brackish conditions. Charred remains of these species appear in hearth sites across Zemar dwellings, confirming a diet that blended marine and desert resources. Evidence of early agricultural adaptation exists in the form of raised garden beds positioned near lagoon margins. These beds, elevated by woven fences made from palm branches, protected plants from blowing sand. Archaeologists have recovered seeds of barley and a drought-resistant pulse crop, both grown with minimal fresh water use. The Zemar likely irrigated these small gardens using a simple but smart method, collecting dew. Large stones arranged on rooftops allowed moisture to condense overnight, then drip into clay channels leading to storage jars. This technique produced only small amounts of water, but enough to sustain edible plants through the growing season. Their clothing, reconstructed from impressions left in clay fragments, appears crafted from lightweight woven fibers. Most garments consisted of loose wraps tied across the shoulders, allowing airflow in extreme heat. For cooler desert nights, the Zemar added layers of wool from small coastal adapted sheep. Patterns on surviving textile fragments show narrow stripes and diamond shapes, possibly representing tidal rhythms or dune forms. Ornaments made from polished shells, carved coral, and pierced stones suggest a subtle but expressive tradition of personal decoration. The Zemar's spiritual worldview seems deeply connected to the interaction between wind, sand, and water. At several excavation sites, archaeologists discovered circular arrangements of stones, each circle containing a central depression filled with fine powdered shell. These appear to have been ritual locations where community members observed the patterns of wind-blown sand. Thin lines carved into stone tablets found nearby depict waves merging into dunes, symbolizing a belief that sea and desert were intertwined forces guiding life. Some of these tablets also display a recurring motif, an eye-like symbol surrounded by parallel lines. Researchers interpret this as a representation of a watchful guardian spirit associated with tides and desert storms. Within Zemar society, social organization appears balanced and cooperative. Homes show consistent sizes, with no clear evidence of elite compounds or specialized high-status burials. Most graves contain simple items such as shell pendants, small knives, and woven mats. However, a few graves near dune ridge edges include decorated pottery featuring intricate swirling designs. These may belong to individuals responsible for ritual or communal decision-making, though the lack of wealth differentiation suggests their roles were symbolic rather than authoritative. Trade formed a significant part of Zemar life. The region's coastal location allowed contact with inland caravans seeking fish products, salt, and decorative shells. Excavations reveal beads made from river stones found far from the desert coast, indicating reciprocal exchange with groups living near fertile valleys. The Zemar produced a fine grain salt harvested from evaporated tidal pools. This salt was shaped into compact blocks that could be transported easily along desert trade routes. Some blocks were stamped with the Zemar eye motif, indicating the earliest known use of standardized branding in the region. Technological innovation appears in tools made from a composite material combining flint flakes with desert resin. This mixture produced strong, flexible blades ideal for cutting reeds, processing fish, and shaping clay vessels.
The Zemar also developed portable windbreak screens woven from palm fibers. These screens could be moved around open courtyards to prevent dunes from depositing sand into household areas. Their pottery, crafted from clay mixed with powdered shell, featured smooth surfaces and narrow mouths that preserved water by minimizing evaporation. One of the most mysterious elements of the Zemar civilization is their system of tidal markers. Along stretches of the ancient shoreline, archaeologists have found upright stones placed in straight lines. Each stone features horizontal carvings that appear to correspond with water levels during various seasons. These markers show differences of only a few centimeters, implying precise observation of tidal behavior. Some scholars suggest that the Zemar predicted both seasonal flooding and lagoon changes by tracking the shadow movements across these carved lines. The ability to read tides would have been essential for timing fishing activities, collecting shellfish, and protecting homes from sudden water surges. The decline of the Zemar remains a subject of ongoing study. Geological surveys reveal that the coastline experienced a gradual but persistent regression over several centuries. As shorelines retreated, the lagoons that sustained Zemar settlements dried slowly, reducing fish populations and limiting access to brackish water. Sand dunes advanced toward the former lagoon beds, covering agricultural terraces and filling living spaces with sediment. Some communities attempted to relocate closer to the shifting water, as indicated by newer, smaller settlements found further inland where lagoons once existed. However, these attempts seem to have been temporary, as even these locations eventually became unsuitable for long-term habitation. Climate data extracted from sediment cores suggest extended drought cycles contributed to their decline. During these periods, dew collection alone could not support agriculture, and trade routes became unreliable due to reduced caravan movement across the desert. Without stable access to food, water, and trade, many Zemar groups likely dispersed and merged into larger inland cultures. The shared designs found in later pottery traditions across nearby regions hint that elements of Zemar art and symbolism continued long after the lagoon settlements were abandoned. Today, the remains of the Zemar civilization lie beneath shifting dune fields, where only fragments surface after coastal winds sweep across the sand. Broken pottery, shell tools, and the tops of buried stone markers occasionally reappear before being covered again. Archaeologists continue to document these fleeting finds, building a clearer picture of a people who thrived by harmonizing with the delicate balance of desert and sea. Their knowledge of tides, dune behavior, and limited resource survival reflects a sophisticated understanding of their environment, demonstrating that resilience shaped every layer of their existence.
The 18th civilization, remembered in archaeological records as the Haroun Steppe Obsidian Network, emerged across a wide, dry grassland where volcanic ridges once fed ancient lava flows. Their territory stretched between fractured basalt hills and long, shallow valleys lined with tough grasses that resisted seasonal droughts. Early surveys of the region revealed deposits of obsidian scattered across the steppe, suggesting that the Haroun deliberately chose this landscape for its mineral resources. Excavations show that their earliest settlements formed around low stone platforms built directly on bedrock, ensuring stability even when winds swept across the plain. Archaeologists identified the first Haroun habitation layers by their distinct use of dark stone in nearly all aspects of construction. Walls, tools, ceremonial altars, and even water troughs were shaped from obsidian or basalt. The stone was chipped with such precision that many fragments display smooth edges sharper than metal blades. Microscopic examination shows repeated, controlled flaking techniques suggesting the Haroun passed down highly specialized craftsmanship from one generation to the next. Their houses were partly semi-subterranean, dug into the earth to provide insulation from the harsh temperature shifts between day and night. Roofs were likely supported by wooden beams sourced from distant river valleys, transported across long distances by caravans.
Daily life of the Haroon people seems closely tied to the grazing of hardy livestock. Bone remains indicate herds of small, resilient cattle and a species of long-haired goat adapted to rocky terrain. These animals provided milk, meat, and wool during cyclic seasons. Their dwellings contained pit storage areas lined with smooth stones that kept grains cool and dry. Botanical remains include barley, millet, and a high-protein wild seed gathered from native grasses. Cooking hearths show signs of long, slow heating, suggesting meals of stews, roasted grains, and preserved meat cooked in clay vessels strengthened with obsidian dust. Textile impressions discovered inside clay shards indicate that Haroon clothing consisted of tightly woven wool layered over soft undergarments made from processed grass fibers. Floral dyes derived from steppe plants created muted tones of brown, gray, and dark red. Decorative elements included obsidian beads drilled with tiny holes worn as necklaces, anklets, or sewn directly into garments. The Haroon were known to create symbol-marked stone plaques tied to their belts. The symbols remain undeciphered, but share repeating motifs, angular lines, branching marks, and stepped patterns, likely representing important familial or clan identities. Spiritual practices centered on a deep reverence for the volcanic mountains bordering their homeland. Archaeologists found aligned stone circles along ridges overlooking the steppe. Each circle featured a central polished stone slab reflecting sunlight during certain times of the year. Some slabs were aligned with sunrise on the solstice, while others pointed toward major obsidian quarries. These alignments suggest that the Haroon integrated astronomy with their resource-gathering activities. Carvings on nearby rock surfaces depict spirals, intersecting triangles, and long linear tracks believed to represent migratory paths of animals or celestial movements. Burial traditions varied based on seasonal conditions. In warmer months, graves were dug into soft earth near rocky terraces. The dead were laid on their sides, accompanied with obsidian tools, drinking vessels, and carved figurines shaped like horned animals. During winter, when the ground hardened, the Haroon constructed cairn burials using stacked basalt stones sealed with clay. These cairns contained fewer goods, possibly because crafting new items was more difficult during cold months. Some burials show traces of red ochre sprinkled across the body, indicating a symbolic connection between earth, blood, and renewal. Economically, the Haroon Steppe Obsidian Network functioned as a regional supplier of obsidian tools and weaponry. Their workshops produced blades, arrowheads, chisels, and ritual mirrors with such craftsmanship that neighboring cultures sought them in trade. The Haroon likely developed long-distance exchange routes connecting mountain passes, river valleys, and desert edges. Beads made from river pearls, copper fragments, and finely woven tapestries found in Haroon sites indicate consistent trade contact with distant regions. Their caravans, composed of pack animals and sled-like stone drag platforms, moved efficiently across steppe terrain. Agriculture remained limited due to the dry climate, but the Haroon practiced seasonal flood farming along narrow river branches fed by melting snow from volcanic peaks. When rivers receded, they left behind nutrient-rich silt where barley and millet sprouted quickly. Stone irrigation channels preserved near one settlement show small-scale water management that extended the growing season. The Haroon also harvested edible roots and wild onions that grew in cracks between basalt boulders. They stored food in large stone containers sealed with clay lids, protecting supplies from rodents. Technological innovation distinguished the Haroon from many neighboring groups. Their tools show early attempts at hafting, combining stone blades with wooden handles for greater leverage. Some obsidian weapons were mounted onto long spears, making them effective for hunting large steppe animals. The Haroon also produced grinding stones with surfaces polished to a high sheen, indicating extensive processing of grains and minerals.
In certain ceremonial contexts, they crafted mirrors by rubbing obsidian until it reflected light clearly. These mirrors may have been used in rituals, signaling, or astronomical observations. Despite the wealth of knowledge uncovered, significant mysteries about the Haron remain unresolved. The symbols etched on their plaques, altars, and cave walls have resisted interpretation. Though researchers recognize repeated patterns, no bilingual inscriptions have been found to aid understanding. Whether the script represents sounds, clan identifiers, or ritual markers is unknown. Another mystery lies in the absence of large residential centers. Although their territory spans a wide area, Haroun settlements remain small, suggesting a decentralized society or mobile lifestyle. This raises questions about how they organized long-distance trade and maintained consistent craftsmanship across generations. The decline of the Haroun civilization is linked to shifts in environmental conditions. Geological evidence indicates a series of drought cycles that reduced river flow, limiting seasonal farmland. As grasslands thinned, grazing animals struggled to find sustenance, pushing herders to migrate. Some scholars believe that volcanic activity played a role. Ash layers found in several abandoned settlements suggest eruptions created air pollution and poisoned water supplies. These environmental stresses may have fragmented the population, forcing communities to disperse toward more stable regions. Another theory suggests conflict with expanding neighboring groups. Excavations uncovered defensive walls at two Haroun sites, rare examples of fortification in their culture. These walls include projecting stone towers built to widen the field of view across the steppe, implying concerns about approaching threats. Whether these dangers were human or environmental remains uncertain. The Haroun were known for their tool-making skills, yet their weapons would have been fragile in full-scale conflict compared to bronze arms emerging elsewhere. Eventually, the Haroun steppe obsidian network disappeared from the archaeological record, leaving behind scattered workshops, burial cairns, and tool caches half buried in grass and soil. Later cultures occupying the steppe inherited some of their techniques, particularly obsidian craftsmanship, but none preserved their unique symbols or stone circle alignments. Today, archaeologists continue to survey the region, finding new fragments each year that gradually clarify the lives of a people who shaped volcanic glass.
The Ashtaran kelp forest guilds are remembered as one of the most unusual ocean-rooted cultures ever recorded through fragmented oral tradition, diver reports, and sediment layer artifacts extracted from the continental shelf near the western Indian Ocean fracture zones. Their world was shaped by towering kelp forests that rose like underwater cathedrals, creating sheltered corridors of gentle green light. The guilds built their entire survival system on the shifting balance between kelp, tides, migrating fish nurseries, and bioengineered rope systems that allowed them to farm, harvest, and even transport materials across currents without needing conventional boats. Their settlements were arranged on floating platforms anchored by stone weights and living kelp trunks, creating villages that moved slowly with the sea but remained stable enough for long-term habitation. The Ashtaran lifestyle depended on rotational harvesting. They never overcut any kelp region, assigning each forest segment to a guild faction with strict conservation rituals. This prevented collapse of their ecosystem and allowed a long-term supply of food, medicinal compounds, and fibers. Their diet consisted of dried kelp sheets, salt-coated marine roots, small reef fish, mollusks, and a fermented paste made from plankton concentrates. Archaeological residue found in sealed earthen jars shows that they processed kelp into bioadhesives and water-resistant coatings used on their floating platforms. Their architecture relied on weaving and binding rather than building with rigid materials. Since stone was scarce and heavy, the Ashtaran engineers designed flexible structures that absorbed the motion of waves rather than resisting them. Roofs were made from layered kelp mats strengthened with natural resins. Walls consisted of rope lattices that allowed airflow and moisture release.
These structures had multiple advantages. They dried quickly after storms, weighed almost nothing, and could be disassembled, repaired, or reconfigured in a matter of hours. This adaptability helped them survive seasonal currents and unexpected tidal surges. The guild system itself was complex. Each guild specialized in a unique ocean-based discipline: kelp cultivation, tidal mapping, rope engineering, medicinal extraction, fish nursery protection, storm prediction, and deep water foraging. Every individual belonged to a guild from childhood and trained under the guidance of senior instructors who were chosen not by lineage but by demonstrated skill. This merit-based structure created high expertise in each field and reduced internal conflict. Records carved into bone panels recovered from a submerged settlement illustrate how guilds used circular voting rituals to make decisions about harvest cycles, migrations, and environmental warnings. The Ashtaran knowledge of tides was extremely advanced. Generational observers tracked lunar positions, monsoon shifts, and underwater current pulses. They recorded these patterns not in written scripts, but in woven tide maps. These maps preserved information through knot positions and layered strands. Researchers studying recovered fragments discovered that certain arrangements corresponded to seasonal temperature changes, while others represented current velocities or safe passage routes through kelp corridors. The maps functioned as both educational tools and communal memory storage. Their clothing was equally distinctive. Instead of using animal hides or woven plant cloth, the Ashtaran people processed kelp fibers into thin, breathable sheets that draped over the body like flowing water. These garments were lightweight and cooled the wearer during harsh sun exposure. They also dried rapidly after immersion, preventing infections or skin irritation. Decorations were minimal, often limited to shell beads or tide-etched stones worn for symbolic purposes. Religion within the guilds revolved around the concept of the living sea spine, a metaphysical thread they believed connected all underwater forests. According to their teachings, the kelp trunks acted as channels for ancient memory and that every harvested section had to be replaced through ritual planting. Failure to do so was believed to disrupt the balance between sea and sky. Priests, known as thread keepers, guided the planting ceremonies and recorded environmental anomalies through rhythmic chants. Although no written language survived, acoustic studies of hollow stones found near their ritual sites indicate that these chants helped synchronize communal planting cycles. One of the most advanced aspects of their culture was underwater communication. The Ashtaran divers used bone flutes that produced low-frequency vibrations, allowing signals to travel through water. They developed a code of pulses and intervals that indicated danger, direction, or resource location. This system was remarkably effective for coordinating group dives in murky conditions or during fast-moving currents. Tool-making relied heavily on natural materials. Fishbone knives, shell scrapers, and coral chisels formed their toolkit. For heavy cutting, they used serrated blades crafted from the mandibles of large crustaceans. Ropes were their greatest technological achievement. By combining kelp fibers with hardened fish glue resins, they produced ropes capable of withstanding extreme tension. These ropes anchored platforms, connected settlements, and supported suspended drying racks. Some underwater ruins show large rope conduits extending deep into the kelp forests, possibly used to trap drifting resources or guide fish schools toward protected nursery zones. Their medicinal knowledge came from long experimentation with algae and marine fungi. Various extracts were used to treat infections, reduce fever, or seal wounds. One compound derived from red-tipped kelp spores acted as an antiseptic with mild anesthetic properties. This made them highly skilled at treating injuries from reefs or underwater predators. Healing rituals combined these treatments with controlled breathing techniques that slowed the heartbeat and reduced blood loss. Despite their expertise, the guilds faced increasing challenges from tectonic activity. Geological analysis indicates that a series of undersea quakes destabilized their anchoring stones and altered current pathways that sustained the kelp forests. Over time, forests thinned,
fish nurseries collapsed and platforms drifted into unsafe regions. Rising sea turbulence strained their rope systems and caused catastrophic failures. Archaeologists believe a final tectonic surge submerged their last stronghold, scattering artifacts across the seafloor. Only fragments remain as evidence of a once harmonized ocean civilization. Today, the Ashtaran kelp forest guilds stand as a reminder that advanced systems can form in places often overlooked by mainland history. Their sustainable approach to food, material engineering, and community cooperation highlights a blueprint for living with rather than against natural environments. Their world dissolved beneath waves, but their ecological wisdom endures across studies of coastal resilience and marine-based architecture. As this journey through 19 ancient societies concludes, the entire series offers a long, calming drift through civilizations, land, myth, engineering, and memory. Each one leaves traces that inform present understanding of innovation, adaptation, and the silent fragility of human environments. If you found this exploration soothing, informative, or inspiring for sleep, consider supporting the continuation